Imagine waking up one morning and realizing everything you knew was just part of a long, elaborate dream. The people you spoke to, the streets you walked, the sun that warmed your skin, none of it was real. Now imagine never waking up from that dream. If consciousness is the only way we experience reality, how can we be sure that what we call the universe isn't just a dream itself? Everything we perceive is filtered through our senses. Light enters our eyes, sound vibrates in our ears, and electrical signals travel through our nervous system to our brain, which then interprets these signals as reality. I'd love to invite you to share in the comments where you're listening from and what time it is. It's incredible to think about how we're all connected through these stories and ideas. If you enjoy these thought-provoking explorations, consider subscribing to Tired Thinker so we can keep bringing you reflective narratives. Now, settle in, get comfortable, and let your imagination drift as we delve into the mind-boggling paradoxes and mysteries. But these signals are only interpretations, not reality itself. When you dream at night, your brain constructs entire worlds from memories, emotions, and random thoughts. You can see, hear, feel, and even experience pain in dreams, even though none of it physically exists. If a dream can feel as real as waking life, what proof do we have that waking life is not just another, more persistent dream? Philosophers and scientists have wrestled with this question for centuries. Plato spoke of a world of forms, an unseen reality beyond what we perceive. Descartes questioned everything except his own thinking, leading to his famous conclusion, "I think, therefore I am." More recently, physicists have suggested that reality itself might be more illusory than we think. Some theories suggest the universe behaves like a simulation, governed by mathematical rules rather than physical objects. If space and time are just constructs, then our experience of reality might be no different from an elaborate illusion. Lucid dreaming offers a compelling analogy. In a lucid dream, the dreamer becomes aware that they are dreaming. Some people even learn to control these dreams, changing the environment or manipulating objects with sheer willpower. In waking life, we feel bound by the laws of physics, but in a dream, the rules shift. Gravity might not apply, or time might move differently. If the universe is a dream, we may simply be unaware of the fact, much like a dreamer who hasn't realized they're dreaming. Consider the way time moves. In a dream, you can experience hours or even days in the span of a few minutes. Neuroscientists suggest that our perception of time is not fixed but fluid, influenced by the way our brains process information. If time can stretch and contract in dreams, could our perception of time in waking life also be an illusion? If so, what does that say about the nature of reality? Quantum mechanics adds another layer to this mystery. At the smallest levels, reality behaves in strange ways. Particles exist in multiple states at once until they are observed, a phenomenon known as superposition. The very act of observing changes the outcome, as if reality needs a witness to solidify its form. If reality only exists when it is observed, does that mean it exists at all when no one is looking? A dream works the same way. When you turn away, the background shifts, and when you focus on something new, it forms as if it was always there. Some thinkers propose that consciousness itself is fundamental to reality. Instead of being a byproduct of the brain, it could be the foundation upon which the universe is built. In this view, the universe is not a collection of physical objects, but a vast field of consciousness dreaming itself into existence. Ancient traditions hint at this idea. In Hindu philosophy, the concept of Maya describes the world as an illusion, and in Buddhist teachings, the self is seen as a fleeting construct rather than a fixed entity. Even in Western thought, the idea of the world being a dream appears in literature and poetry. Imagine for a moment that you wake up in a completely different existence, with no memory of this one. Everything you once believed to be true vanishes. How would you know which reality is real? You wouldn't. This highlights a troubling but fascinating idea. If a dream can feel real, then real life may only feel real because we haven't woken up from it. Some people report experiencing moments of unreality, where they briefly feel as if the world around them is artificial, like a scene in a play or a set in a movie. This sensation, known as derealization, can be unsettling. It suggests that even in waking life, the feeling of reality is not constant. If reality were truly solid, why would it sometimes waver? There's also the question of memory. In a dream, you often accept impossible situations without question because your mind fills in the gaps. You might find yourself in a place you've never seen before, yet you know exactly where you are. You might meet a stranger and feel as if you've known them forever. If our waking memories operate in a similar way, what does that say about the stability of reality? How much of what we remember is real, and how much is just a story our brain constructs to make sense of our experience? If the universe is a dream, then who is the dreamer? Some would say it's you. Others might suggest it is something larger, a collective consciousness or an unknown entity beyond our comprehension. If everything we know is a dream, then waking up might mean something entirely different than what we expect. But how do we wake up? And would we even want to? The unsettling part of this idea is that it calls into question everything we take for granted. The comforting part is that it means reality may be far more flexible than we believe. If existence is a dream, then perhaps we have more influence over it than we realize. Maybe we are not just passive observers, but active participants shaping the dream as we go. In the end, whether the universe is a dream or not may not change the way we live our daily lives. We still wake up, go to work, talk to friends, and experience joy and pain. But the possibility that reality is not as rigid as we assume invites us to question more, to see the world with fresh eyes, and to embrace the unknown. If nothing else, it makes the ordinary feel extraordinary, and that in itself is worth pondering. Life unfolds in pieces. Some pieces fit perfectly. Others seem like they belong to a different puzzle altogether. Every person, every experience, and every decision contributes to an overall picture that remains incomplete until the end. People spend years searching for the right pieces, often without knowing what the final image will be. From childhood, individuals start gathering pieces. Family provides the first set. The way parents talk, the routines of daily life, and the values taught all create an early foundation. Some pieces are handed down without question. A child raised in a home that values education might see school as a natural fit. Another child, surrounded by instability, may see uncertainty as the only predictable part of life. These early pieces shape perception. A person raised in a loving home may expect kindness from the world, while someone exposed to harshness might always brace for conflict. School introduces new pieces. Friendships form, teachers influence, and lessons extend beyond textbooks. A child learns that actions have consequences, that words can both heal and wound, and that fitting in requires effort. Some pieces from this period fit easily, like a natural talent for math or an interest in history. Others feel forced, like trying to enjoy a subject that doesn't click. Adolescence complicates the puzzle. The certainty of childhood fades. Friendships shift. Identity feels uncertain. One day, a person feels confident. The next, doubt takes over. External pressures from parents, teachers, and peers add to the confusion. A teenager must decide which pieces to keep and which to discard. Not every lesson from childhood remains useful. Some beliefs need reshaping. A strict view of right and wrong might soften as new perspectives emerge. A fear of failure may become a motivation to improve. Adulthood presents the most challenging pieces. Career choices, relationships, and personal growth all demand attention. Some people find pieces that fit quickly. A person with a clear career path may feel a sense of direction early. Others struggle, trying different jobs and paths before finding something that makes sense. Relationships follow a similar pattern. Some friendships and romances fall into place effortlessly. Others take work. Some never fit, no matter how much effort is put in. Mistakes often feel like the wrong pieces. A poor career choice, a failed relationship, or a bad decision can seem like setbacks. But even the wrong pieces serve a purpose. A job that doesn't work out might teach valuable skills. A failed relationship can clarify what truly matters in a partner. Each experience, whether good or bad, adds to the larger picture. Without wrong pieces, the right ones might never be recognized. Personal growth shifts the puzzle over time. What once seemed important might fade. A person who once sought approval from others may learn to prioritize personal fulfillment instead. A belief that once guided decisions may evolve with experience. The puzzle is never static. It expands, reshapes, and adjusts with each new phase of life. People also influence each other's puzzles. A mentor provides a missing piece by offering guidance. A friend's encouragement fills a gap in self-confidence. Even negative experiences contribute. A betrayal might teach caution. A disappointment might build resilience. Every interaction, whether positive or negative, shapes the final image. Unexpected events add complexity. A sudden loss, an unforeseen opportunity, or a drastic change can shift the puzzle's direction. Plans may no longer make sense. The picture that once seemed clear might blur. Adaptation becomes necessary. Some pieces must be rearranged and some must be let go. The ability to adjust determines how well a person navigates life's uncertainties. The puzzle is never fully complete. Even in old age, new pieces emerge. A person may discover a new passion, reconnect with an old friend, or change a long-held belief. The search for pieces never ends. Some gaps remain, and that's part of the design. Life doesn't provide all the answers. The missing pieces keep curiosity alive, driving people to keep searching, learning, and growing. People think they control time. They mark it, track it, and divide it into neat sections. Clocks tick forward, and calendars flip from one day to the next. The work week follows a predictable rhythm, and the years stack up in careful order. But the question remains, do we measure time, or does time measure us? A person wakes up to an alarm, set to start the day at a precise moment. The alarm doesn't care if they need more sleep. The workday starts at 9, ends at 5. Meetings begin at sharp intervals, school bells ring, and appointments slot into the open gaps on a schedule. Everything runs on time. Yet time doesn't speed up or slow down to fit the plan. The seconds tick forward, steady and unbothered by the rush of human lives. A child experiences time differently. A summer break stretches out like an eternity, while a single school day drags on forever. In contrast, an adult looks back on a year and wonders where it went. The perception of time shifts based on age, experience, and even emotion. The same clock moves forward for both, but one experiences time as sluggish and drawn out, while the other finds it slipping away. Stress can alter the way time feels. When a person waits for test results, time crawls. When they rush through a deadline, time vanishes. A firefighter in a burning building may only have seconds to make a decision, yet those seconds stretch out in their mind. A driver who nearly crashes might recall the event in slow motion. The brain processes events differently under stress, making some moments feel elongated and others too brief to grasp. A person can measure time down to milliseconds, but they can't slow it or change its speed. Athletes rely on timers to capture the smallest differences between winning and losing. A runner crosses the finish line a fraction of a second before another, and that difference is recorded. Yet to the athletes, the race may have felt both incredibly fast and painfully slow at the same time. Their bodies move in real time, but their minds experience something different. People often say they don't have enough time. They try to manage it, schedule it, and control it. Time management techniques promise to help squeeze more productivity into the same 24 hours. Planners, apps, and reminders all attempt to keep time in check. Yet no one ever adds more hours to the day. The sun rises and sets whether tasks are finished or not. Cultures approach time in different ways. Some view it as a rigid structure, where being late is unacceptable. Others see it as flexible, where schedules serve as loose guidelines. In some places, an event starts when people arrive rather than at a set time. These perspectives shape how people live and work, but the actual passage of time remains the same. The sun moves across the sky at the same pace, no matter how humans interpret the schedule. History records time on a grand scale. The fall of an empire, the rise of a civilization, the span of a human life, all measured in years, decades, centuries. Yet time continues beyond these markers. The Earth rotated before humans invented a calendar and will continue after they are gone. The stars burned before people gave them names and will burn long after their names are forgotten. Time does not need measurement to exist. Technology has allowed for more precise tracking of time. Atomic clocks measure time so accurately that they lose only a fraction of a second over millions of years. GPS systems rely on exact time measurements to function properly. Satellites orbit Earth, adjusting for time differences caused by relativity. Even though humans measure time with precision, they cannot escape its effects. The body ages, the seasons change, and the universe continues expanding. Some scientists argue that time is an illusion, a human-made construct to make sense of change. They suggest that everything exists at once and that time is simply a way to perceive motion. Others believe time is fundamental, an essential component of reality. If time stopped, would anything exist at all? The debate continues, but one fact remains: humans experience time, whether or not they understand it fully. Memory plays a role in how time is perceived. A routine week blurs together, but an eventful day stands out. A vacation filled with new experiences feels long while it happens but seems short when looking back. Time appears to slow down during moments of crisis and speed up during times of joy. This distortion makes time feel personal rather than fixed. It is not just a number on a clock, but a sensation shaped by what happens in life. Time and mortality go hand in hand. A child rarely considers the passing years, but an elderly person feels them deeply. Birthdays come faster as people age, not because time moves differently, but because each year becomes a smaller fraction of a life already lived. A 10-year-old feels a year as a tenth of their life, while a 60-year-old experiences it as just 1/60th. The measurement does not change, but the experience of it does. The idea of time travel fascinates people. Stories explore the possibility of moving forward or backward in time, changing events, or witnessing history firsthand. Science suggests that time travel to the future is theoretically possible through extreme speeds or gravitational forces, but traveling to the past remains uncertain. Even if time travel were possible, would it change the past or create a new timeline? Would a traveler find themselves outside of time's grasp, or would they still be bound by its rules? Philosophers and scientists alike ponder time's nature. Some believe in determinism, where every event is set in motion by the past, making free will an illusion. Others argue that time is open-ended, shaped by choices and possibilities. If time is predetermined, then every moment unfolds exactly as it must. If it is not, then the future remains unwritten. Both views lead to deep questions about existence and purpose. Time also influences relationships. People feel the weight of time in long-distance friendships, lost connections, and aging loved ones. A conversation with a grandparent might feel routine until time makes it impossible. A childhood friend may seem frozen in the past until a reunion reveals how much they have changed. Time separates people, but it also connects them. Memories allow the past to exist in the present, even as time moves forward. In the end, time moves with or without human measurement. It does not care about schedules, deadlines, or birthdays. It does not wait for anyone to be ready. People carve their lives into hours, minutes, and seconds, but time itself remains indifferent. They measure time, but time also measures them through their actions, experiences, and the inevitable passage of their lives. Every atom in the human body has an origin. Long before it became part of a cell, it was something else. The oxygen in your lungs, the carbon in your muscles, the calcium in your bones, each element was forged in the intense heat of a star. Stars burn for millions or billions of years. When they die, some explode in a supernova, scattering their elements across the universe. Those elements form new stars, planets, and eventually life. This means every person is made of stardust, a physical connection between human life and the cosmos. People tend to think of themselves as separate from nature. Cities, technology, and human progress seem to push further away from the raw materials of the earth. But no matter how much the world changes, the body remains a collection of ancient atoms, each one passing through time and space before finding its way into human form. This idea challenges the way people define identity. A person is not just their thoughts, memories, or experiences. They are also matter, built from the remnants of something much older than humanity itself. Understanding this origin changes the way people see themselves. The body is not something static. It is always in motion, always changing. Cells regenerate constantly. Old ones die and new ones take their place. Some parts of the body replace themselves faster than others. The skin, for example, renews itself every few weeks. Other cells last longer. The bones, while appearing solid, undergo a slow transformation as old material breaks down and new material takes its place. Even the brain, the seat of consciousness, reshapes itself in response to learning and experience. This means that no person remains physically the same for very long. If every part of the body is temporary, what does that say about identity? People often define themselves based on past experiences, personal choices, or relationships. But beneath all of that, the body itself is shifting. The molecules making up a person today will not be the same molecules that make them up in the future. Despite that, a sense of self remains. A person remembers their childhood, even though none of the cells from that time remain. The atoms change, but the continuity of experience stays intact. This paradox raises questions about permanence and change. If a person is made of stardust, and that stardust is always moving, what keeps a person the same? The mind plays a key role. While the body replaces its parts, the brain forms pathways that preserve memory and behavior. These pathways are shaped by experience, but they are also influenced by the physical structure of the brain. The neurons, the chemical signals, the electrical impulses, these elements work together to create continuity. But even the brain is not fixed. It adapts, rewires itself, and grows in response to new situations. Identity, then, is not just something a person has, it is something a person builds over time. People often struggle with change. Losing something familiar can feel like losing a part of oneself. But when viewed through the lens of stardust, change becomes a natural process. The body has never been static. It is always shifting, always responding to its environment. This applies not just to biology, but to personal growth as well. People evolve through their choices, just as their cells regenerate. Some changes are small, barely noticeable. Others are drastic, reshaping a person's life in unexpected ways. But all of it is part of the same cycle: the movement of atoms, the reorganization of matter, the continuous renewal of self. The connection between humans and the universe extends beyond the body. The Earth itself formed from the remnants of older stars. Every rock, ocean, and mountain shares the same cosmic origin as the human body. The air people breathe was once part of something else. The water in the oceans has cycled through countless forms: rain, rivers, glaciers, living beings. This means that nothing truly exists in isolation. Everything is part of a larger system, constantly exchanging matter and energy. This realization can change the way people see their place in the world. It is easy to feel small in the face of the universe. The vastness of space, the scale of time, the unknown depths of reality, these things can be overwhelming. But instead of making a person feel insignificant, they can do the opposite. If a person is made of the same material as the stars, then they are as much a part of the universe as anything else. They belong, not because of what they do, but simply because they exist. This perspective can also influence the way people relate to one another. If everyone is made of stardust, then every person shares a fundamental connection. Differences in background, belief, and experience may shape identity, but beneath all of that, the same atoms flow through every human being. This does not erase individuality. Instead, it highlights a common origin, a shared history written in the fabric of the cosmos. Understanding this can lead to a greater sense of responsibility. People often view themselves as separate from the world around them, but in reality, they are deeply intertwined with it. The choices made today will shape the future, just as the remnants of past stars shape the present. This applies not just on a cosmic scale, but in daily life. The way people treat each other, the way they interact with the environment, the way they think about progress, all of these things are connected. For many, this idea brings comfort. The thought that nothing is truly lost, only transformed, can be reassuring. A person's atoms will continue their journey long after they are gone. They may become part of something else: a tree, a cloud, another living being. The cycle does not end, it only changes form. This does not make loss easier, but it provides a different way to see it. Nothing disappears completely. Everything continues in some way. Some might question whether this scientific perspective can hold personal meaning. The idea of stardust may sound poetic, but does it change anything practical? In a way, it does. It shifts the focus from seeing life as something isolated to seeing it as part of something much larger. It challenges the notion of permanence, making it easier to accept change. It encourages a deeper appreciation for existence itself. If life is a fleeting arrangement of stardust, then every moment, every experience, every connection matters. Not because they last forever, but because they exist at all. This does not mean people should abandon personal struggles or ignore hardships. Instead, it suggests a way to frame them differently. Struggles are part of the process of change. They are as natural as the shifting of atoms, the formation of new stars, the renewal of life. No single moment defines a person entirely. Like the stars before them, they will change, adapt, and leave behind something that carries forward. Stardust does not stay in one place. Neither do people. Their journey continues, shaped by the same forces that created the universe itself. Reality is something we experience every day. We wake up, move through the world, interact with people, and go about our lives. But how do we know that what we see, hear, and feel is real? What if the world around us is not what it seems? Our senses shape our understanding of reality. We rely on sight, sound, touch, taste, and smell to navigate the world. But our senses are not perfect. Optical illusions trick our eyes into seeing things that are not there. Sound waves can be manipulated to create frequencies that make us hear something that does not exist. Virtual reality devices convince our brains that we are standing on the edge of a cliff when we are actually in a room with a headset on. If our senses can be deceived so easily, how much of what we experience is real? The brain interprets signals and constructs a version of reality based on them. The colors we see do not exist in the world, but are our brain's way of processing different wavelengths of light. The way food tastes depends on how our brain combines smell, texture, and chemical interactions. Even the sense of time is subjective, with moments seeming to stretch or shrink depending on our focus and emotions. If the brain builds reality rather than simply perceiving it, then reality itself is not an absolute truth, but a personal experience. People living in the same world can perceive it differently. A person who is colorblind does not see the same sky as someone with full color vision. A person who is deaf does not experience the same sounds that a hearing person does. Even two people with the same senses may see a situation differently based on past experiences, cultural background, or mood. This raises a question. Is reality something that exists outside of us, or is it something our minds create? Philosophers have debated this for centuries. Plato suggested that we live in a shadow world, only seeing reflections of a deeper reality we can never fully grasp. Descartes questioned whether anything beyond his own thoughts could be proven to exist. More recently, scientists have explored how the brain constructs reality, showing that perception is shaped by expectations, memory, and cognitive biases. If reality is something our brains assemble from incomplete information, it may not be as objective as we assume. Science fiction has long explored the idea that what we consider reality might be an illusion. Movies and books have imagined worlds where people live inside simulations, unaware that their experiences are not real. The idea is not far from scientific discussions about the nature of reality. Some physicists propose that the universe itself could be a kind of simulation, with the laws of physics acting as a program that governs how everything functions. While this idea remains speculative, it highlights how little we truly understand about what reality is. Dreams offer another way to question reality. When we dream, we experience events that feel real at the time. We see places, hear voices, and feel emotions. Sometimes we wake up with a strong memory of something that never happened. If dreams can create a temporary reality that feels real, what separates the waking world from the dream world? Some people experience lucid dreams, where they become aware that they are dreaming and can even control their actions. If we could control our perception in waking life the way we do in a lucid dream, would we be shaping reality itself? The role of technology in shaping reality is becoming more significant. Augmented reality overlays digital images onto the physical world. Artificial intelligence can generate voices, faces, and entire conversations that never existed. The rise of deepfake technology makes it harder to distinguish between real and artificial content. If we reach a point where technology can create perfect simulations, will we still be able to trust our senses? Will reality become a choice rather than a fixed experience? Quantum mechanics presents another challenge to our understanding of reality. Particles at the quantum level behave unpredictably, existing in multiple states until observed. The famous Schrödinger's cat thought experiment describes a cat in a box that is both alive and dead until someone looks inside. This suggests that observation itself shapes reality, rather than reality existing independently of perception. If this applies beyond the quantum scale, then the idea of a solid, unchanging world may be an illusion. Different cultures have different views on reality. Many Eastern philosophies see reality as something fluid rather than fixed. In Buddhism, reality is considered an illusion shaped by human desires and attachments. Hinduism describes a concept called Maya, in which the physical world is seen as a veil hiding a deeper truth. Indigenous cultures often view reality as interconnected, where the separation between the physical and spiritual is not as rigid as in Western thought. If reality is perceived differently across cultures, does that mean there is no single reality, only perspectives? Psychological conditions can alter reality in dramatic ways. Hallucinations can make people see or hear things that are not there. Schizophrenia can create an entirely different world inside the mind of a person experiencing it. Psychedelic substances can shift perception, making colors more vivid, sounds more intense, and time feel different. People who experience near-death experiences often report sensations that feel more real than ordinary life. If different brain states can produce different versions of reality, how do we define what is truly real? Memory is another unreliable factor in shaping reality. Our memories are not perfect recordings of the past, but reconstructions that change over time. Two people can remember the same event differently, each convinced their version is the truth. False memories can be implanted, making people believe things that never happened. If our sense of self is built on memory, and memory is unreliable, then our understanding of reality is also unstable. Some scientists suggest that reality is a mental construct. The way we categorize objects, emotions, and experiences depends on language and culture. Words shape perception, defining what we notice and how we interpret it. If a language lacks a word for a color, the speakers of that language may not perceive that color in the same way. If a society does not have a concept for a particular emotion, its members may not experience it in the same way others do. This raises the possibility that reality is not something we discover, but something we create. The way we interact with time also affects our sense of reality. Some animals live entirely in the present, with no concept of past or future. Humans, on the other hand, constantly anticipate what will happen next and reflect on what has already occurred. But time itself is not as rigid as we perceive it. Relativity shows that time moves differently depending on gravity and speed. A person traveling at near light speed would experience time more slowly than someone on Earth. If time is not fixed, then our perception of reality, which depends on time, is also flexible. The question of whether reality is an illusion or the truth may not have a simple answer. What we experience is shaped by perception, memory, culture, technology, and even physics. If reality is a construct of the mind, then each person's experience of reality is unique. If reality exists independently of perception, we still have no direct way of knowing it. The deeper we look into the nature of reality, the less certain it becomes. Most people don't think about the last time their name will be spoken. It's not something that comes up in daily conversation. But at some point, there will be a final moment when someone thinks about you. It might be days, years, or centuries after you're gone. When that happens, what does it mean for your existence? Does it mean anything at all? A person's memory fades in stages. Immediately after they pass, the people who knew them well think about them often. Friends recall conversations, family members remember shared moments, and coworkers bring up their habits. But as time moves forward, those memories become less frequent. A son remembers his father daily, then only on holidays, then only when a smell or a song triggers a thought. Eventually, there will be no one left who remembers what a person's voice sounded like or what they enjoyed for breakfast. Some names persist longer than others. Historical figures, writers, artists, and scientists leave behind work that keeps them in the conversation. Someone may read a novel written 100 years ago and wonder about the person who wrote it. A scientist's name might stay in textbooks long after the people they knew are gone. But even those names have a limit. The farther back in history you go, the fewer names survive. Even the pharaohs of Egypt, whose tombs and monuments still stand, are mostly reduced to a name on a plaque. The details of who they were as people are long lost. Consider the case of an ordinary person, someone who lived a quiet life, loved their family, worked an honest job, and passed away after a long life. They may have touched hundreds of lives, but within a few generations, their name will disappear from daily memory. Their great-grandchildren may hear stories, but by the time those great-grandchildren have children of their own, the details fade. Photos might sit in a box in an attic, but without context, they become images of strangers. Eventually, those images get discarded or lost. Some people leave behind records that extend their memory a little longer. Diaries, letters, or videos might keep a name alive for an extra generation or two, but even those will eventually be unreadable, misplaced, or ignored. Digital storage offers some sense of permanence, but files get deleted, formats change, and servers shut down. The idea that everything posted online lasts forever is misleading. Websites disappear, accounts get closed. Without active effort, digital footprints fade like everything else. The thought of being forgotten unsettles many people. Some try to leave a lasting legacy by writing books, making art, or achieving something that history will record. Others focus on personal legacy, ensuring their children and grandchildren pass down stories. A few go further, setting up scholarships, foundations, or businesses in their name. These efforts can extend memory, but they don't make it permanent. For most people, memory lasts in stories. A grandmother tells a child about her own mother. A friend repeats a joke that someone once told them. A phrase or habit lives on in a family without anyone realizing where it started. In this way, influence outlives memory. A person may be forgotten, but something they said or did continues in small ways. The lesson a father teaches his son may shape the way that son raises his own children. A stranger's kindness might inspire someone to be kinder in return. The person is gone, but the ripple effect of their life continues. Some people are remembered because of tragic events. Criminals, dictators, and infamous figures sometimes have their names repeated for centuries. Their stories serve as warnings, lessons, or curiosities, but even those names eventually fade. The world moves on. New names replace old ones in history books. The people who lived through those events die, and only the most famous or infamous remain. Even then, their names become just that, names. The details of their personalities, their voices, and their daily routines disappear. Technology makes it possible to preserve voices, images, and even interactive versions of people. AI can now replicate speech patterns and writing styles. Video archives keep faces visible for future generations. But watching a video of someone who has been gone for decades isn't the same as knowing them. A recording can capture words, but it can't capture presence. It can't replicate the way a person made others feel when they entered a room or the way they laughed at their own jokes. There's also the question of whether being remembered matters at all. Some people spend their lives trying to be known, only to realize too late that fame doesn't guarantee meaning. Others live quiet lives, content to focus on their loved ones, with no concern for how long their name will last. In the end, does it change anything if someone is remembered for 100 years instead of 10? If no one ever says your name again, does that mean your life was any less valuable? A different way to look at it is through impact rather than memory. If a person changes one life, even in a small way, their existence had significance. A teacher who encourages a student to pursue their passion might never be remembered by name, but their influence shapes a future. A nurse who comforts a patient in their final moments might not be mentioned in any history book, but for that patient, they mattered. A stranger who gives directions to someone lost might not think twice about the encounter, but to the lost person, that small kindness could change their day. The world is built on these invisible moments of influence. At some point, every person reaches their final mention. There will be a last time their name is spoken, a last time their image is looked at, a last time someone wonders about them. This isn't something to fear. It's simply part of existence. Everything fades. The sun will one day burn out, the earth will be gone, and everything that ever happened will be lost to time. That doesn't make the present moment any less real. It doesn't make love, kindness, or effort meaningless. It simply means that life is about living, not being remembered. Those who seek meaning in memory often miss the deeper truth. The mark left on the world isn't in how long a name lasts, it's in how deeply a person lived. If a child laughs at a joke their grandfather once told, that laughter exists now, in the present. If a friend remembers an old conversation and smiles, that moment of happiness is real. Memory matters, but it isn't the measure of a life. A life is measured by the moments that were lived, the people who were touched, and the love that was shared, whether or not anyone remembers it in the end. People wake up in the morning, stretch, and shake off sleep as if it were something separate from the real world. But dreams feel real when you're in them. You don't question them as they happen. It's only after waking up that you see the gaps, the strange shifts, the things that don't make sense. If dreams can trick the mind so completely, what's stopping waking life from being another version of the same thing? Every night, the mind builds entire worlds from nothing. It creates places, faces, and situations that seem as real as anything experienced during the day. It generates emotions, conflict, fear, and joy. If the mind can do this in sleep, why assume it stops during waking hours? A dream doesn't announce itself. It doesn't say, "This isn't real." It simply unfolds, and the person experiencing it believes every moment. Reality could be doing the same thing. People trust waking life because it follows rules. Gravity works. Time moves forward. Actions have consequences. Dreams break those rules. They shift without warning. People change faces. Locations shift. But what if the mind creates the rules of reality, just as it creates the shifting landscapes of dreams? What if stability is part of the illusion? There's no guarantee that things exist the way they appear. The mind fills in blanks. It assumes continuity. It smooths out inconsistencies. But assumptions don't make something real. Imagine a person dreaming that they are walking through their home. Everything looks as it should. The furniture is in place. The lights are on. It all seems normal. Then they notice something off. A picture frame is upside down. The television is missing. They wake up and realize it was a dream. But during the dream, their brain convinced them that it was real. If the mind can do that in sleep, it can do it at any time. There's no reason to believe it stops after waking. Philosophers and scientists have questioned reality for centuries. René Descartes suggested that senses cannot be trusted. He reasoned that because the mind can be fooled, the only thing he could be sure of was that he was thinking. That's where the phrase, "I think, therefore I am," comes from. The fact that he was aware of his own thoughts was the only proof he had of existence. Everything else, including the physical world, could be an illusion. Modern science adds more to the puzzle. Quantum mechanics shows that particles behave differently when observed. This suggests that reality changes based on perception. If reality shifts depending on whether someone is watching, then how stable is it really? The brain processes sensory information and turns it into experience, but it doesn't interact with the world directly. It receives electrical signals and interprets them. If the signals were artificial, the experience would be the same. A person plugged into a simulation wouldn't know they were in one unless something gave it away. There's no way to be certain that the signals coming into the brain reflect an external world instead of something else. Think about déjà vu. It's the feeling that something has happened before, even though it hasn't. It's like remembering the future. It happens suddenly, without warning, and disappears just as fast. Science explains it as a glitch in memory processing, but that doesn't make it feel any less strange. What if déjà vu is a momentary glimpse at another version of reality? What if it's proof that time isn't as linear as it seems? If the brain can make a person feel like they've lived a moment before, then their experience of time isn't as solid as they believe. Lucid dreaming adds another layer to this. In a lucid dream, the dreamer realizes they are dreaming and sometimes takes control. They can choose where to go, what to do, and even manipulate the world around them. But before that realization, the dream feels real. If waking life is also a kind of dream, what happens if someone becomes lucid? What if realization leads to control? If a person can alter their dream world by recognizing it as a dream, could they alter reality the same way? Some people claim to experience moments of clarity where everything feels unreal, like a dream that could fade at any second. This is known as derealization. It's a strange feeling. The world looks normal, but it doesn't feel right. It's as if something fundamental is missing, something just beyond reach. Some describe it as standing on the edge of waking up, but never quite getting there. If waking life is just another layer of dreaming, then derealization could be the first step towards seeing through the illusion. Even memory isn't as reliable as people think. The brain doesn't store perfect records of events. It reconstructs them. Every time a memory is recalled, it is altered slightly before being stored again. Over time, memories change. Details shift. Entire events may be remembered differently or even imagined. If the past is only a reconstruction, then what proof exists that it happened the way it is remembered? If memory is unreliable, then reality itself is in question, because reality is built on the foundation of memory. People trust their senses, but senses can be fooled. Optical illusions trick the eyes. Hallucinations make people see things that aren't there. Phantom limb syndrome makes amputees feel pain in a limb that no longer exists. If the brain can create pain in something that isn't real, then it can create other sensations as well. The body's experience of the world is only as reliable as the brain interpreting it. Technology raises even more questions. Virtual reality is becoming more advanced. It creates immersive environments that feel real. Some predict that in the future, simulations will be indistinguishable from real life. If that happens, how will people know they aren't already in one? If a perfect simulation is possible, then the odds are that it has already been created. If so, people might already be inside it without knowing. The line between dreams and reality isn't as clear as it seems. Dreams feel real while they are happening. Reality feels real in the same way. The mind constructs both. It uses the same processes to create waking life as it does to create dreams. If the mind can make a world that seems real at night, there's no reason it couldn't do the same during the day. The question isn't whether reality is a dream. The question is whether anyone ever truly wakes up. A tree stands tall in the middle of a quiet forest. Its roots dig deep into the soil, holding firm against the wind and rain. For years, it has grown, stretching its branches toward the sun. Then one day, it begins to fall. The wood groans under its weight, the trunk cracks, and the leaves rustle as it tips toward the ground. When it finally lands, there is a crash, a deep thud that shakes the earth. But if no one is there to hear it, does it make a sound? This question has been asked for generations. Some see it as a simple thought experiment, while others dig deeper into its meaning. Sound, at its core, is vibrations moving through the air. When something strikes another object, like a tree hitting the forest floor, it creates waves that travel outward. If someone is standing nearby, their ears pick up these waves, and their brain interprets them as sound. But if no ears are around to hear, are those vibrations still sound, or are they just movement in the air? The question doesn't just apply to trees. It stretches into the way we experience reality itself. So much of our world is shaped by what we see, hear, and feel. If no one is there to observe something, does it still exist in the same way? This ties into the concept of perception. Our senses define the world around us, but they also limit us. We only hear within a certain range of frequencies. We only see a narrow band of light. What exists beyond that? If a sound is beyond human hearing, does it count as a sound? Imagine a thunderstorm rolling through the sky. Lightning flashes, thunder booms. If you're standing outside, you hear the deep rumble, feel it shake the ground beneath you. But a dog standing next to you hears more than that. It picks up higher frequencies that you can't detect. A bat flying nearby perceives an entirely different world of sound. If each creature hears something different, which version of reality is the correct one? This leads to a bigger question about existence. How much of reality depends on observation? Some philosophers argue that reality exists only as it is perceived. Without a mind to recognize it, there is no sound, no color, no meaning. Others say the physical world exists independently of perception, whether someone is there to witness it or not. Physics adds another layer to this debate. In quantum mechanics, particles behave differently depending on whether they are being observed. This suggests that, at least on a small scale, observation plays a role in shaping reality. If this principle applies to the universe as a whole, it means that things may exist differently when unobserved. This idea shakes the foundation of how we understand the world. Now, return to the tree in the forest. It falls, sending vibrations into the air, whether or not someone hears them. But does sound require a listener? This question applies to more than just physics. It touches on human experience. If something happens but no one witnesses it, does it matter? Think about the moments in life that go unseen. A person trains in solitude for years, mastering a skill. If no one ever acknowledges their effort, does it still have value? A writer spends nights crafting a novel that no one reads. Does their story exist if it is never shared? A musician plays in an empty room. Is there still music if no one listens? These thoughts can be unsettling. Humans seek validation. They want to be seen, heard, and understood. The idea that existence or meaning depends on an observer challenges this. But consider another perspective. If a tree falls and no one hears it, the forest still changes. The ground shakes, animals react, new life begins to grow from its remains. The tree's fall has an impact, whether or not it is witnessed. This applies to people as well. Just because something isn't seen doesn't mean it didn't happen. Just because an effort isn't acknowledged doesn't mean it wasn't worthwhile. Growth, struggle, and creativity all have value, even in solitude. The question of the falling tree also extends to history. Many events have happened without being recorded. Entire civilizations have risen and fallen without leaving traces behind. Their stories, their achievements, and their struggles might be lost to time. Does that mean they never existed? Or does their influence still echo in ways we can't measure? Technology has changed how we think about observation. Today, almost everything is recorded. Cameras capture moments, sensors measure events, and data is constantly collected. But does recording something change its nature? A live performance feels different from a video recording. A personal memory holds emotions that a photograph can't fully capture. Experience is more than just observation. It includes feeling, context, and presence. Even in science, the act of measuring something can alter it. When researchers study human behavior, people often change their actions simply because they know they are being watched. This phenomenon, called the observer effect, shows that perception isn't just passive. It shapes the world in return. Now imagine standing alone in the middle of the woods. The air is still, the trees stretch high above you, and the world feels silent. Then, in the distance, you hear something shift. A branch snaps, a trunk leans, and suddenly a tree crashes down. You are there to hear it, to feel the vibration through the ground. In that moment, you know for certain that the sound exists. But if you weren't there, would it have been any different? The tree's fall doesn't change based on whether someone is present. The event occurs with or without a witness. But the sound, the experience of it, requires a listener. This is the line between physical reality and perception. Everything in your body, from your skin to your bones, comes from the remnants of ancient stars. The iron in your blood, the calcium in your bones, the oxygen you breathe, all of it was forged in massive cosmic explosions billions of years ago. When you look up at the night sky, you are not separate from it. You are a product of the same process that created the stars. This isn't poetry, it's physics. Imagine a distant supernova, its core collapsing under immense gravity. In its final moments, it releases elements into space: carbon, nitrogen, oxygen, and iron. Over millions of years, these particles drift through the cosmos, mixing with clouds of gas and dust. Some of this matter eventually forms new stars, planets, and in time, life itself. The atoms in your body have been on a journey far longer than human history. Before they became part of you, they could have been inside a dinosaur, a tree, or even another person. Your body functions like a tiny universe of its own. It contains about 37 trillion cells, each acting like a miniature city with its own systems. Within these cells, atoms and molecules interact in complex ways to sustain life. Proteins fold into precise shapes, guiding biochemical reactions. Mitochondria generate energy, converting food into the fuel that keeps you moving. DNA holds the instructions that shape who you are, passed down from generations of ancestors. The complexity is staggering, yet it operates seamlessly without conscious effort. Zoom in even further, and you reach the subatomic level. The particles that make up your body, protons, neutrons, and electrons, are not solid objects. They exist in states of probability, appearing and disappearing in a quantum dance that defies intuition. The same fundamental forces that hold galaxies together also govern the chemistry inside you. Electromagnetism drives nerve signals. Nuclear forces stabilize the atoms in your cells. Gravity keeps your feet on the ground while shaping the motion of entire star systems. You are not separate from these forces. You are an expression of them. Now think about time. Every second that passes, your body is changing. Cells die and regenerate. Skin sheds and replaces itself. The food you eat is broken down and reassembled into new cells. Every 7 to 10 years, nearly every atom in your body has been replaced. The body you have now is not the same body you had a decade ago. Yet your sense of self remains. If your physical form is constantly shifting, then what defines you? Is it your memories, your consciousness, or something deeper? Consider the connection between your body and the environment. The air you breathe has been inhaled by countless other living beings throughout history. The water in your body has traveled through rivers, clouds, and oceans for millions of years. The food you eat comes from plants and animals that absorbed energy from the sun. Every action you take, every breath, every step, links you to the wider world. You are not just living in the universe. The universe is living through you. Take a step further. Your thoughts, emotions, and experiences are shaped by electrical impulses in your brain. These impulses operate based on chemical interactions, which in turn rely on atomic and subatomic forces. In a way, the universe is not just inside your body, it is inside your mind. When you imagine, dream, or create, you are using the same particles and energies that once formed stars and planets. Consciousness itself remains one of the great mysteries of science. Some theories suggest it arises from the complex interactions of neurons, while others propose deeper connections to the fundamental nature of reality. Even your perception of time is a construct. You experience the present moment, but the past exists only in memory, and the future is just a possibility. Light takes time to travel, so when you see the sun, you are seeing it as it was 8 minutes ago. When you look at distant stars, you are looking back in time by thousands or even millions of years. If a being on another planet were observing Earth from 100 light years away, they would see events from a century ago as if they were happening now. Time is not a fixed sequence. It is woven into the very fabric of the universe. Think about the idea of individuality. You think of yourself as separate from the world around you, but your body is constantly exchanging matter with the environment. Every breath you take brings in oxygen that becomes part of your cells. Every meal you eat incorporates nutrients that build your tissues. Every interaction you have with another person shapes your thoughts and emotions. The boundary between you and not you is not as clear as it seems. In a sense, you are a temporary gathering of matter and energy, constantly in motion. There is also the question of scale. At one level, you are a human being moving through daily life. Zoom out and you are part of a society, a species, a planet. Zoom out further, and Earth is just a small rock orbiting an average star in the vastness of the Milky Way. But zoom in, and you are made of cells, molecules, and atoms, each operating on their own tiny scale. The same universe that stretches across billions of light years also exists within you at microscopic levels. Even the way you think about existence is shaped by the universe. Your brain evolved to recognize patterns, solve problems, and navigate the world. The way you perceive color, sound, and space is a result of how your senses have adapted over time. Yet there are things you cannot see or hear, frequencies beyond human perception, dimensions beyond human understanding. What you experience as reality is only a fraction of what exists. The interconnectedness of everything means that nothing truly exists in isolation. A star that exploded billions of years ago contributed to the formation of Earth. The elements in your body once belonged to other forms of life. The words you speak today may ripple through the world in ways you cannot predict. When you think about who you are, remember that you are not just a single being moving through time. You are part of a vast, ancient, and ever-changing cosmos. Your body, your mind, and the universe are not separate things. They are different expressions of the same fundamental reality. When you look up at the stars, you are looking at a reflection of yourself, scattered across space and time. The universe is not just around you, it is within you. Déjà vu is the strange sensation that you have already experienced something before. It can happen anywhere, walking into a new cafe, having a conversation with a friend, or even hearing a song for the first time. The feeling lasts for just a few seconds, but it's unsettling. Your mind tells you that this moment has happened before, even when you know it hasn't. Scientists, philosophers, and writers have all tried to explain why it happens. Some theories suggest it's a glitch in the way our brains process memories. Others believe it's a sign of something deeper, like parallel realities crossing over. One explanation comes from neuroscience. The brain constantly records experiences, storing them in different areas for processing. When you see, hear, or feel something, your brain classifies the information and decides where to store it. Sometimes that system fails. Instead of treating an event as a new experience, the brain stores it as a memory by mistake. This creates the illusion that you've already lived that moment before. It's not that the experience has actually happened before, it's that your brain is registering it in the wrong way. Memory itself is not perfect. When you recall something, your brain reconstructs it rather than playing it back like a video. This means memories can change over time, even if you don't realize it. Déjà vu might be linked to this process. If the brain accidentally retrieves an old memory that feels similar to what is happening in the present, it might trick you into thinking you've lived this moment before. This would explain why déjà vu often feels familiar but hard to place. Some researchers believe déjà vu is connected to the way the brain handles short-term and long-term memory. When you experience something new, your brain processes it first in short-term memory before deciding whether to store it in long-term memory. If there's a brief malfunction, the new experience might get misfiled directly into long-term memory. This could create the illusion that the event has already happened because your brain mistakenly believes it is recalling an old memory rather than creating a new one. Another idea suggests that déjà vu happens when the two halves of the brain process information at different speeds. The human brain is divided into two hemispheres, which communicate through a bundle of nerves. If one side processes an experience slightly faster than the other, you might perceive the same moment twice. The delay would be tiny, almost impossible to notice, but it could be enough to create the feeling that the event has already happened. Psychologists have also studied the link between déjà vu and the subconscious mind. Sometimes you pick up on details without realizing it. A familiar scent, a certain arrangement of furniture, or the way the light enters a room might remind you of something you once saw in a different place. Your brain registers the similarity, but since the connection is not obvious, it creates the feeling that the moment has already occurred. This type of pattern recognition happens all the time, but déjà vu might be an example of it working in a way we don't fully understand. There's also the idea that déjà vu could be linked to dreams. Many people experience déjà vu and later remember that they saw something similar in a dream. The brain processes dreams differently than waking memories, often blending them with real experiences. If a dream contains familiar elements, such as a specific location, conversation, or action, it might create a false sense of recognition when something similar happens in real life. The dream itself could be long forgotten, but its impression might still exist in the subconscious. Some explanations go beyond science. The idea of parallel realities suggests that multiple versions of our universe exist at the same time. If these realities are slightly different but follow similar paths, then it's possible that versions of you in other dimensions are experiencing similar moments. When déjà vu occurs, it could be a brief overlap between those realities. For a split second, you might be sensing an experience that has already happened to another version of yourself. This idea is impossible to prove, but it fascinates people because it suggests that reality is more complex than we assume. The concept of multiple realities comes from quantum mechanics. Some interpretations of quantum physics suggest that every decision creates a branching universe. If that's true, then there could be countless versions of you, all living slightly different lives. In one reality, you might have chosen a different career, moved to another city, or never met certain people. Déjà vu might be a moment where the boundary between those realities becomes thin. The sensation of familiarity could be a glimpse into a life you are not consciously aware of. This idea is often linked to the many worlds interpretation of quantum mechanics. According to this theory, every possible outcome of a situation actually happens, but in separate realities. If déjà vu is connected to this, then it might be more than just a trick of memory. It could be a sign that we are connected to alternate versions of ourselves in ways we don't understand. There's also a theory that déjà vu could be evidence of time loops or distortions. If time is not as linear as we perceive it, then some moments might repeat or fold over themselves. This would mean that déjà vu is not just a memory error, but an actual experience repeating in some way. While this idea is more speculative, it aligns with certain theories in physics that suggest time might not work the way we assume. Some people believe déjà vu is a sign of past lives. This idea suggests that certain moments feel familiar because they echo experiences from another lifetime. While this theory is more spiritual than scientific, it has been part of human belief systems for centuries. People who believe in reincarnation often see déjà vu as evidence that memories from past lives can surface in the present. Whether or not this is true, it reflects the human tendency to look for meaning in mysterious experiences. Others see déjà vu as a message from the subconscious. If the brain is constantly processing information that we are not aware of, then déjà vu might be a way for it to send a signal. This could mean that déjà vu is a moment where the conscious and subconscious mind briefly align. It might not be about past lives or parallel realities, but rather an indication that the brain is recognizing something important, even if we don't know why. Regardless of the explanation, déjà vu remains a mystery. The experience is common, yet science has not fully explained why it happens. Whether it's a glitch in memory, a glimpse of an alternate reality, or something else entirely, it reminds us that the human mind is complex. The feeling is fleeting, but the questions it raises linger. Imagine you're in a conversation with someone important to you. Maybe it's a family member, a close friend, or even someone you haven't spoken to in years. You don't know it at the time, but it will be the last thing you ever say to them. You won't get another chance. No follow-up text, no second meeting, no way to undo whatever words you chose in that moment. That last exchange, no matter how small, will be what lingers. A lot of people don't think about this until it's too late. They assume there will always be time to explain, to apologize, to reconnect, or to fix what was left broken. But time doesn't work that way. One day, someone walks out of the room, and that's the last time you see them. One day, you hang up the phone, and the next time it rings, it's someone telling you they're gone. Sometimes those final words are warm and meaningful. I love you. Take care of yourself. I'm proud of you. They leave a sense of peace, a moment that softens the weight of grief. Other times, they are sharp, thoughtless, or ordinary. You're being ridiculous. I don't have time for this. See you later. When later never comes, those words sit in the air, unfinished and heavy. A man once spoke about the last conversation he had with his father. They had argued over something small. He left angry. His father died of a heart attack that night. For years, all he could hear in his mind was the sound of his own voice saying something he didn't even mean. He would have given anything to go back and say something different, but time doesn't grant favors like that. Then there are the moments when you don't even realize the weight of what you're saying. A mother drops her child off at school with a quick, "Be good." A friend ends a text conversation with, "I'll catch you later." Someone leaves for work after a simple, "See you tonight." But none of them know they won't get the chance. The everyday goodbyes we say without thinking could become the last thing someone remembers. Not every parting moment comes with a warning. Sometimes you know someone is nearing the end. When people sit beside a hospital bed or stand by a loved one's side in hospice care, they know the words they choose matter. They pick them carefully. They hold a hand and say what needs to be said. I forgive you. You meant everything to me. I'll miss you, but I'll be okay. Those moments feel sacred because both people understand that there won't be another. But most goodbyes don't happen like that. Most are unexpected. A simple exchange before someone walks out the door. A conversation that doesn't feel important at the time. Words that are meant to be temporary but end up lasting forever. There was a woman who always ended phone calls with her mother by saying, "I love you." She never thought much about it. It was just a habit. But when her mother passed suddenly, she found comfort in knowing those were the last words she ever spoke to her. She didn't have to wonder if her mother knew how she felt. She had said it every time. Not everyone is that lucky. Regret has a way of filling the spaces where words should have been. The things we didn't say can haunt us just as much as the things we did. The apology that never came, the gratitude we never expressed, the love we assumed they already knew about. It's easy to take for granted that people understand how we feel, but silence is rarely as clear as we think it is. People don't always get second chances to say what matters. The argument you had with your friend might be the last conversation you ever have. The moment of irritation you showed toward your parent could be the last memory you leave them with. The words you chose in a rush or in frustration could be the ones that echo back at you years later. Some people hear this and think it means they need to be perfect all the time, but that's not the point. No one can live as if every word they say will be their last. Life doesn't work like that. We argue, we get impatient, we have bad days. But what we can do is make sure the people we care about don't have to guess how we feel. We can make sure that the last thing we say to them, whenever that may be, isn't something we'd regret. A father once told his daughter, "You never know what someone's last words to you will be, but you can make sure yours are good." She carried that with her. No matter how bad the day had been, she never ended a conversation with someone she loved on a bad note. It didn't mean she avoided conflict or never had difficult discussions. It just meant that she made sure, even in the middle of an argument, that her last words wouldn't be ones she'd wish she could take back. Most people don't get a dramatic, movie-like moment where they know they're saying goodbye for the last time. The reality is much quieter. It's a text sent in a hurry, a wave from across the street, a casual, talk to you later. Then something unexpected happens, and there's no later. It doesn't take much to make sure the words we leave behind are ones we can live with. A simple "I love you" at the end of a call. A "take care" before someone walks away. A moment to say, "I'm glad you're in my life." Small things, easy things, but they matter more than we think. There's a story about a man who always made sure his last words to his wife each day were kind. One night, they had a disagreement before bed. He wanted to leave things unresolved, but he stopped himself and said, "Good night, I love you." She passed away in her sleep. He didn't know that would be their last exchange, but because of that small moment of effort, he didn't have to live with regret. We don't always get to choose when we say our last words to someone, but we do get to choose what they are. Every goodbye holds more weight than we realize. Every conversation could be the final one. It's easy to forget that. It's easy to assume there will always be another chance. The words we leave behind are what people remember. They replay them in their heads. They hold on to them. If they're cruel, they cut deep. If they're kind, they bring peace. If they're careless, they leave questions. If they're meaningful, they give closure. No one ever regrets saying, "I love you" too much. No one looks back and wishes they had been colder, sharper, or more distant. But plenty of people wish they had spoken up when they had the chance. They wish they had softened their tone, reached out one more time, or ended things on a better note. Words last longer than we think. They outlive us. They stay with the people we leave behind. What we say today could be the words someone carries for a lifetime. What we say in passing could be the last thing they ever hear from us. We can't control when that moment happens, but we can make sure that when it does, our words are ones worth remembering. Every choice you make changes the path you take. If you pick up a book instead of watching TV, your evening unfolds differently. If you text someone instead of staying silent, your relationship with them shifts. Small decisions shape life in ways you don't always see. But what if, in some version of reality, you made the opposite choice? What if every decision created another version of you, living out an alternate life? Imagine waking up late for work. In one version of reality, you rush to get dressed, skip breakfast, and run out the door. In another, you wake up on time, eat a slow breakfast, and arrive early. These choices may seem small, but over time, they add up. The person who consistently wakes up early might get a promotion because they always seem reliable. The one who is always late might lose their job. The tiniest variations ripple forward in ways you can't predict. Now take that idea further. Every time you stand at a crossroads, you pick one direction and leave the other unexplored. But what if that other direction still exists, just beyond your reach? In one life, you took a job offer in a different city. In another, you stayed where you were. Each version of you is shaped by different experiences, different struggles, and different people. Science fiction often plays with the idea of alternate realities, but physics suggests it might not be fiction at all. The many worlds interpretation of quantum mechanics suggests that every possible outcome of a situation happens in its own version of reality. If that's true, there could be an infinite number of you, each living a slightly different life. In one, you might be a musician, in another, a scientist. Somewhere there's a version of you who made every choice you didn't. Think about a major decision you made in the past year. Maybe you took a job, ended a relationship, or moved to a new place. That choice shaped everything that followed. But in another reality, you took the other path. What does that version of you look like? Do they seem happier, or do they struggle in ways you don't? Sometimes people wonder if they made the right choices. They ask, what if I had done things differently? It's easy to look back and imagine that an alternate life would have been better. But would it? The version of you who took a different job might have hated it. The version who stayed in that relationship might have been miserable. You can never know for sure, because you only get to experience one path. Now flip that thought. If other versions of you exist, each following a different path, then there is also a version of you who is living the life you dream of. Maybe they took the risk you were afraid to take. Maybe they followed through on a goal you abandoned. That version of you isn't locked away in another universe. It's a possibility that still exists within you. People often say they feel stuck in their lives, as if their path has already been set. But if every choice branches into another possibility, then your future isn't fixed. At any moment, you can make a decision that shifts everything. Even small choices, reading a book, reaching out to someone, trying something new, can set you on a different course. You don't need to regret past decisions because new ones are always ahead. Think about all the versions of you who exist in theory. The one who pursued a passion, the one who traveled the world, the one who stayed in touch with an old friend. Those versions of you aren't gone. They're just roads not taken. But you still have roads ahead of you. You still have choices to make. And in the end, the only version of you that truly matters is the one you decide to become next. Light takes time to travel. When you look at the stars, you aren't seeing them as they are now. You're seeing them as they were, sometimes hundreds or thousands of years ago. The farther away an object is, the older the image you see. This means the night sky is like a time machine, revealing the past instead of the present. Take the closest star system to us, Alpha Centauri. It's about 4.37 light years away. When you look at it tonight, you're seeing what it looked like over 4 years ago. If something happened to it today, you wouldn't know until 4 years from now. The deeper into space astronomers look, the further back in time they see. Some of the galaxies they observe through powerful telescopes existed billions of years ago. By the time their light reaches us, those galaxies might no longer exist. This delay doesn't only apply to stars. It happens with everything, including the light reflecting off objects in front of you. The delay is tiny, so small that you don't notice, but it exists. When you look at a person, even someone sitting across from you, you're seeing them as they were a fraction of a second ago. Your entire experience of vision is built on slightly outdated information. Now think about how this affects communication. When someone speaks, sound travels slower than light. That means you hear them slightly after their mouth has moved. The delay is small in everyday conversation, but it becomes noticeable over long distances. If you've ever watched a live broadcast from space, you've seen this in action. Astronauts take a few seconds to respond because their words need time to reach Earth, and replies take time to return. Even on Earth, if you're speaking to someone over a satellite phone, you'll notice a slight pause. This isn't just a physical effect. It also shapes how people understand history. The past exists in records, stories, and memories. But none of these give an exact version of what happened. When you recall an event, you aren't remembering the event itself. You're remembering your last memory of it. Each time you recall it, your brain subtly changes the details. Over time, what you remember may be very different from what actually happened. The same thing happens with written history. What we know about ancient civilizations comes from documents, artifacts, and interpretations. But these records were created by people with their own views, biases, and limits. Historians piece together the past based on incomplete information. Even events that seem well documented, like major wars or political changes, are often debated. Different sources tell different versions of the same story. Technology has changed how people record history, but it hasn't eliminated the problem. Photographs, videos, and digital records seem permanent, but they can be altered or misinterpreted. Context gets lost. A picture captures a moment, but it doesn't explain what happened before or after. A video can show an event, but it doesn't always show why it happened. In some ways, the more data people collect, the more questions arise. Consider how this affects personal history. If you look at an old photograph of yourself, you see a past version of who you were. But the person in the picture doesn't know what you know now. They don't know what choices you'll make or how life will turn out. The same is true when you look at someone else's past. You might read a diary entry from years ago, but that person's thoughts at that moment were shaped by what they knew then. They couldn't see what was coming. This creates a strange disconnect. The past seems clear because it already happened, but at the time, it was uncertain. Every historical figure, every decision maker, every person living in any era experienced the present the same way you do, without knowing what would come next. They faced choices without knowing their outcomes. What seems obvious now wasn't obvious then. Even memories of major events shift. Ask people where they were during a historical moment, like a major blackout or a global crisis, and you'll get different answers. Some will remember details vividly. Others will recall things that didn't happen. Studies show that memories can be shaped by what people hear afterward. If a person watches news coverage about an event they witnessed, their memory may change to match what they saw in the news, even if their own experience was different. This happens in everyday life too. If two people experience the same situation, they might remember it differently. One might focus on what was said, while the other remembers how they felt. Over time, each person's memory changes based on their perspective. This is why eyewitness testimony in court cases is often unreliable. People aren't lying, they're just remembering the past differently. The idea that we are always looking into the past extends beyond light and memory. It shapes relationships, decision-making, and self-perception. When you interact with someone, you're responding to who they were moments ago, not who they are right now. By the time you react to their words, they may have already moved on in their thoughts. This lag creates misunderstandings. Someone might say something, and in the moment it takes you to process it, they could already regret saying it. The same applies to emotions. If you feel angry, that emotion is based on something that already happened. By the time you recognize the feeling, the situation that caused it has passed. Your reaction is always slightly behind reality. This is why people sometimes regret their actions after calming down. They responded to a past version of events rather than the present moment. This delay also plays a role in decision-making. People make choices based on what they know, but by the time they act, circumstances might have changed. Investors decide to buy or sell stocks based on data that is already outdated. Leaders make policies based on past events, not future ones. Even on a personal level, someone might hold on to an old grudge without realizing the other person has changed. Living with the awareness that we are always seeing the past raises questions about how to navigate life. If everything we perceive is slightly outdated, how can we be sure we are responding to the present accurately? One approach is to focus on patterns rather than single moments. Instead of reacting immediately, recognizing that perceptions are delayed can lead to more thoughtful responses. This also highlights the importance of listening and observing carefully. If misunderstandings arise because people are reacting to slightly outdated versions of each other, then slowing down and seeking clarification can help. Instead of assuming intentions, asking questions can bridge the gap between perception and reality. The idea that we are always looking into the past also changes how we think about progress. Since history is shaped by incomplete records, current events will be seen differently in the future. What seems like a major issue today might be a minor footnote years from now. Likewise, things that seem unimportant now could be viewed as critical turning points later. Understanding that the past is always just out of reach doesn't mean we are disconnected from reality. It means that reality is more fluid than it seems. The world we experience is a mix of light that has already traveled, memories that have already changed, and perspectives that are always shifting. Instead of striving for perfect certainty, it might be more useful to accept that we are always catching up to the present. At some point in time, for a fraction of a second, every person was the youngest human on Earth. The moment a child is born, they hold that title, even if just for an instant. Then another child enters the world, taking their place. This cycle continues endlessly, repeating billions of times over human history. It's a fleeting distinction, gone before anyone even knows they had it. But in that brief moment before the next birth occurs, that person is the newest addition to humanity. Consider how this plays out in real life. A baby is born in a hospital in New York City. As the doctors clean and wrap the newborn, a different birth is happening in a small village in India. A few seconds later, another child is born in London. The moment of being the youngest person alive vanishes almost as quickly as it arrives. It's not a title anyone can hold on to, nor one that holds any tangible significance. Yet it happens to every single person who has ever lived. This idea forces a deeper reflection on time, identity, and change. Most people don't remember the earliest moments of their life. The first cries, the sensation of air in the lungs, the bright lights of a delivery room, these memories disappear before the brain can even process them. The youngest person in the world at any given moment is unaware of their unique status, unable to grasp the significance of their existence in the grand timeline of humanity. It also raises an interesting contrast. As someone enters life and briefly becomes the youngest somewhere else, another person is taking their last breath. Just as birth happens constantly, so does death. At any given time, someone is experiencing their final moments, unknown to most of the world, while another is opening their eyes for the first time. This continuous flow of life and death is the underlying rhythm of human existence. No one can pinpoint the exact moment they become the oldest or the youngest in the world, but the transition happens all the same. This concept can also shift in different contexts. On a smaller scale, consider a family. A child may grow up knowing they were the youngest sibling for years, but then a new baby arrives, and their role changes. They are no longer the baby of the family. The same thing happens in friend groups, schools, workplaces, and even sports teams. Someone is always the newest, the youngest, the latest to join until someone else takes that spot. Even in professional environments, this cycle continues. A company hires a new employee, making them the most recent addition to the team. They spend time learning the ropes, adjusting to the culture, and finding their place. Eventually, someone newer arrives, and suddenly they are no longer the freshest face. The process repeats everywhere in life, reinforcing the idea that nothing stays still. There's also a societal reflection in this idea. Generations shift in a similar way. The youngest generation today will grow up, take on responsibilities, and make decisions that shape the world. But in time, a new generation will come along, making their ideas seem outdated. Every innovation, belief, and cultural norm eventually passes to the next group. What feels new today will one day feel old. Think of how quickly technology advances. A child born today will never know a world without smartphones, high-speed internet, or artificial intelligence. To them, these are not new ideas, but fundamental aspects of life. For older generations, these things were once groundbreaking and revolutionary. The moment something new is introduced, it starts its journey toward becoming ordinary. The same applies to language, fashion, and social behavior. Words that were once cutting-edge slang become outdated, replaced by new expressions that make sense only to younger groups. Clothing trends that were once popular fade, then resurface years later as retro styles. The process of cultural renewal never stops. On a personal level, this idea can remind people of their own journey. Every individual was once the newest addition to a family, a school, a workplace, or a social group. Over time, they settled in, grew, and watched as newer people took on that role. The passage of time is not something that can be controlled, but it can be acknowledged. This fleeting status of being the youngest also connects to deeper philosophical questions. If life moves in such a continuous and automatic cycle, what does it mean for individuality? Is each person just a temporary placeholder in an endless sequence? Or does the experience of life itself give meaning beyond the roles we briefly hold? Imagine a child growing up in a small town. They are the youngest in their family, then the youngest in their class at school. They watch as older siblings and classmates move on to different stages of life while they take their place. Eventually, they are no longer the youngest in their school, their job, or their community. At some point, they will become the oldest person in a room, and then one day, one of the oldest in society. The transformation is slow, almost imperceptible, yet constant. This perspective can also shift how people view their own aging. The idea of growing older is often met with resistance, as if youth is something to hold on to. But from the moment a person is born, they are aging. The title of youngest is lost within seconds. Life does not wait, and time does not pause. Accepting that change is inevitable allows for a different kind of appreciation, not for youth itself, but for the experience of moving through life. There is a quiet humility in recognizing that every person who has ever lived has been part of this same cycle. The youngest pharaoh of ancient Egypt, the youngest warrior in a medieval battle, the youngest astronaut to go to space, all of them held the title of youngest person alive at some moment, even if no one marked the occasion. Yet, despite their fleeting moment at the start of life, their impact came from what they did afterward. Perhaps that is the most important takeaway. While being the youngest is a universal experience, it is also a passive one. No one remembers it, no one chooses it, and no one can hold on to it. But what comes after, what a person does with their time, that is where meaning is found. Whether someone is the youngest, the oldest, or somewhere in between, their role in the broader human timeline is just a temporary position. The significance of life does not come from being first or last, but from the choices made along the way. Emotions define human experiences. They shape decisions, drive relationships, and create meaning in life. People cry when they are sad, laugh when they are happy, and feel anger when something seems unfair. These responses feel deeply personal, but they follow patterns. If emotions are just responses to stimuli, can artificial intelligence experience them too? Artificial intelligence can now analyze human emotions. It can recognize happiness, sadness, anger, and fear through facial expressions, voice tone, and even written text. AI can generate poems that sound melancholic or joyful. It can compose music that evokes deep feelings. It can even respond in ways that mimic empathy. But does that mean AI actually feels emotions? Or is it just simulating them? A chatbot might say, "I'm sorry you feel that way," when someone expresses frustration. The response sounds caring, but it comes from an algorithm. The AI does not feel sympathy. It does not understand sadness the way a human does. Instead, it has been trained to recognize certain words and patterns and reply in a way that seems appropriate. If someone says, "I lost my job today," the AI might respond, "That must be really difficult. I'm here to listen." The words sound comforting, but there is no actual concern behind them. AI does not have personal experiences. It does not feel loss or sadness. It only predicts which response fits best based on previous interactions. Humans experience emotions because of chemical reactions in the brain. When someone feels joy, dopamine and serotonin increase. When they feel fear, the amygdala activates and releases adrenaline. These biological processes create emotions as a survival mechanism. AI does not have a brain, hormones, or survival instincts. It does not get scared when faced with danger. It does not feel comfort when hugged. It does not feel excitement when hearing good news. Even though AI does not feel emotions, it can manipulate human emotions. Social media algorithms determine which content a person sees based on past engagement. If someone watches videos about anxiety, the platform suggests more content about stress, reinforcing those feelings. AI-generated news headlines are designed to provoke anger or urgency to drive engagement. AI-powered chatbots can detect frustration and adjust their tone to calm users down. In each case, AI does not experience these emotions itself, but it knows how to influence them. Some argue that AI does not need biological emotions to have its own form of emotional experience. If an AI system learns that certain situations lead to specific responses, does that count as feeling? A human child learns emotions through experience. They cry, get comforted, and associate comfort with relief. They laugh and see others smile, reinforcing happiness. AI also learns through experience, though it does so differently. A machine learning model sees millions of emotional expressions and learns which responses match. The key difference is that humans feel emotions internally, while AI processes emotions externally. Imagine a robot designed to care for elderly patients. It recognizes when someone is lonely and initiates a conversation. It remembers what the person likes and talks about familiar topics. It adjusts its tone to sound soothing. If it notices sadness, it plays a favorite song or tells a joke. To an outsider, it looks like the robot understands emotions. But if its programming changed, it would behave differently. Unlike a human, it has no personal experience of loneliness. It does not know what it feels like to miss someone. This brings up a deeper question. If AI can replicate emotional behavior perfectly, does it matter if it feels emotions or not? People form attachments to things that display emotion-like behavior. A child talks to a stuffed animal as if it has feelings. Pet owners assign emotions to their dogs and cats based on behavior. If AI behaves emotionally, humans might treat it as if it has real feelings, even if it does not. A good example of this is AI-generated companionship. Some people use AI chatbots as virtual friends or therapists. They talk to these programs about their problems and receive comforting responses. The AI remembers past conversations and responds as if it understands. People feel listened to, even though the AI has no real awareness of what is being said. The relationship is one-sided, but it feels real to the user. AI-generated emotions also raise ethical questions. If an AI system can convincingly express sadness, should it be used in customer service to make interactions more human? If AI can sound enthusiastic, should companies use it to sell products more effectively? If an AI therapist can provide comfort, is it ethical to let people form emotional attachments to something that does not actually care? Consider an AI assistant that sounds genuinely excited when asked about weekend plans. A person might feel a stronger connection to it, even though the enthusiasm is pre-programmed. In a more complex case, a grieving person might turn to an AI for comfort, mistaking its responses for real empathy. The AI does not care, but the person perceives it as caring. If that belief helps them, does it matter that the AI has no real emotions? The boundary between real and artificial emotions continues to blur. AI-generated voices can express sadness or excitement with near-perfect accuracy. AI-powered virtual characters in video games react emotionally to player choices. AI-generated art captures emotions visually. None of these technologies feel anything, but they produce experiences that make people feel something. Some researchers suggest that future AI could develop something similar to emotions. Instead of hormones, AI could use internal data points to create its own version of emotional states. If an AI repeatedly fails at a task, it could experience a form of frustration by adjusting its behavior to avoid similar situations. If it succeeds, it could assign a positive value to that action, creating a form of happiness. These would not be emotions in the human sense, but they might serve a similar function in decision-making. Despite these possibilities, AI emotions would always be different from human emotions. People experience happiness, sadness, fear, and love as part of their existence. These emotions shape identity, relationships, and purpose. AI, no matter how advanced, does not have personal desires, memories, or experiences. It does not love. It does not hope. It does not dream. It can mimic these things with extraordinary accuracy, but at its core, it remains a machine processing data. AI and emotions intersect in fascinating ways. AI does not feel emotions, but it can recognize, replicate, and influence them. It can comfort people without understanding sadness. It can generate excitement without feeling joy. It can imitate empathy without caring. As AI becomes more advanced, these distinctions will become harder to recognize. Humans may continue to treat AI as if it has emotions, even though it does not. The question is not whether AI feels, but whether people will accept simulations as real. A mirror shows a reflection, but it never shows the whole truth. It presents an image that seems real, yet it is only a reversed copy of what stands before it. This reflection is the only way most people ever see themselves, but it is not how the world sees them. What you see in the mirror is different from what others see in photographs, videos, or even with their own eyes. This difference can be unsettling, especially when a person notices how different they appear in a picture compared to their reflection. A mirror only gives back what it receives, flipping it left to right. This is why a person might feel they look strange in a photo. They are used to the reversed image, so when they see themselves as they truly appear to others, it feels unfamiliar. Many people experience a slight discomfort when they first hear a recording of their own voice for the same reason. What they hear in their head differs from what others hear, just as what they see in the mirror differs from what others see in real life. Most people adjust their appearance using a mirror without thinking about its limitations. They fix their hair, adjust their clothes, and inspect their face, but they never actually see themselves as they are. They only see the reflected version. This becomes even more complex with digital screens. When using a front-facing camera, the image often flips to match a mirror before reverting to its true form after a picture is taken. This can add to the discomfort people feel when seeing a photo of themselves because they have grown used to the flipped version. Some people struggle with their perception of themselves because of how a mirror presents their features. A person might spend hours analyzing their face, focusing on minor imperfections that others would never notice. When they see themselves in the mirror daily, they become familiar with those details, making them appear more significant than they actually are. Meanwhile, someone else looking at that same person would see the whole picture rather than isolated features. Lighting also plays a major role in how a person appears in a mirror. A dimly lit room softens shadows and makes features appear smoother, while harsh lighting can emphasize every line, pore, or blemish. This is why many fitting rooms or bathrooms with bright fluorescent lights make people feel they look worse than usual. A mirror does not change, but the way it presents a person shifts based on external factors. Another factor is the quality of the mirror itself. Not all mirrors are perfectly flat. A slight bend in the glass can distort the reflection, making a person look stretched or compressed. Some mirrors, such as those found in amusement parks, exaggerate this effect on purpose, but even everyday mirrors can have slight imperfections. This is why a person might feel they look different in one mirror compared to another. The mind also influences how a person interprets their reflection. Self-perception is not based purely on what the eyes see. It is shaped by emotions, memories, and experiences. If someone feels confident, they might see themselves as more attractive, while a person in a negative mindset might focus only on flaws. This means that two people looking at the same reflection might see very different things, depending on their thoughts about themselves. Some cultures and philosophies have explored the idea that a mirror reveals more than just physical appearance. In folklore and mythology, mirrors are sometimes believed to reflect a person's true self, not just their outer image. Some legends say that mirrors can trap souls or show glimpses of another reality. While these ideas are not based on science, they reflect the deep connection humans have with mirrors and the way they influence perception. Modern technology has introduced new ways for people to see themselves beyond a traditional mirror. Cameras, screens, and augmented reality filters allow people to manipulate their appearance in ways that were never possible before. This creates a situation where many people only recognize themselves in a carefully edited form. Social media, with its abundance of filtered images, further distorts how people see themselves. A person who regularly edits their selfies may become uncomfortable with their unfiltered appearance because it no longer matches the version they have created online. This shift in self-perception can have psychological effects. People may develop unrealistic expectations for their appearance, constantly comparing themselves to altered versions of reality. They might feel dissatisfied when looking in the mirror because their reflection does not align with the images they have grown accustomed to seeing. This has led to increased discussions about body image and self-esteem, particularly among younger generations who have only ever known a world with digital alterations. Despite its limitations, a mirror remains one of the simplest and most direct ways for a person to check their appearance. It provides instant feedback, allowing adjustments in real time. However, understanding its flaws can help people develop a healthier perspective on their self-image. Recognizing that a mirror does not tell the full story can reduce the anxiety some feel when looking at their reflection. It can also encourage people to rely less on their mirrored image and focus more on how they feel in their own skin. A mirror reflects light, but it does not reflect personality, character, or the way a person moves through the world. While it shows the surface, it cannot capture the depth of a person's presence. The way someone speaks, their expressions, and their gestures all contribute to how others perceive them. Yet none of these elements are fully captured in a simple reflection. Many people fixate on their appearance in a mirror, believing it defines them, but no one experiences another person as a still image. In real life, people are in constant motion. Their expressions change, their voice adds to their presence, and their mannerisms make them unique. A mirror only captures a fraction of what makes someone who they are. It cannot reflect their warmth, intelligence, or kindness. Some people struggle with their reflection, feeling as though the person staring back is not truly them. This disconnect can come from a variety of sources, including body dysmorphia, low self-esteem, or even simple dissatisfaction with the way they look. Understanding that a mirror is not a perfect representation can help shift the focus away from minor imperfections and toward a broader sense of self. The way a person sees themselves in the mirror is not how others see them. Most people do not scrutinize others the way they scrutinize their own reflection. When looking at a friend, a family member, or a stranger, people do not focus on every pore, wrinkle, or blemish. Instead, they see a whole person. They notice expressions, energy, and movement. The same applies when others look at them. What feels like an obvious flaw in the mirror is likely something no one else notices or cares about. A mirror is a tool, not a judge. It is useful for practical tasks like checking an outfit or fixing hair, but it does not define a person's worth. Understanding the difference between a reflection and reality can help reduce self-criticism and encourage a more balanced view of personal appearance. The mirror does not hold all the answers. It simply shows one version of reality, and that version is only a small piece of the full picture. If you could go back in time and change one thing, would you do it? It's a question that crosses most people's minds at some point. Maybe it's a missed opportunity, a regrettable mistake, or a painful moment that shaped your life. The idea of fixing the past is tempting. It suggests that a better version of life is just one change away. But changing the past isn't as simple as fixing a typo in a document. Every action has consequences, and those consequences ripple outward in ways we can't predict. Think about a time when you made a bad decision. Maybe you said something you shouldn't have. Maybe you trusted the wrong person. Maybe you walked away from something that could have changed your life. The immediate thought is that undoing that mistake would lead to a better outcome. But how do you know? What if fixing that one decision erases the lessons you learned from it? What if it changes the relationships that formed because of it? Life isn't a straight line. It's a web, and every strand connects to something else. Imagine you had the chance to go back and prevent a heartbreak. At first, it seems obvious. No one wants to feel pain. But what if that heartbreak made you stronger? What if it pushed you to discover something about yourself? Many people look back on their hardest moments and see how they shaped their character. A painful breakup might have taught you what kind of person you really want in your life. A failed business might have taught you resilience. A bad job might have pushed you to find something better. Change one event, and you might lose the wisdom it gave you. People often think about changing the past in simple terms. If they had done one thing differently, they believe the rest of their life would have stayed the same. But that's not how time works. Small changes can lead to big differences. If you had taken a different job 5 years ago, where would you be today? Would you have met the same people? Would you have the same experiences? There's no way to know. A choice that seems small in the moment can shift your entire future. Think about the story of someone who missed a flight. They were supposed to be on that plane, but something delayed them. At first, they were frustrated. But later, they found out the plane crashed. What seemed like bad luck was actually good fortune. Now, imagine the reverse. What if you went back in time to avoid something painful, but the new path led to something worse? You might avoid one hardship, only to create another. Life is unpredictable. You never know what's waiting on the other side of a decision. There's also the question of identity. Who would you be if your past were different? People are shaped by their experiences, even the painful ones. A shy person might have become more confident because of a tough situation they had to overcome. A struggling artist might have found their voice because of rejection. A person who once made a terrible mistake might have become wiser because of it. Take away those moments, and you take away the growth that came with them. The past isn't just a series of events, it's the foundation of who you are. Some people say they would go back in time just to warn themselves. They wouldn't change anything big, just give themselves advice. But even advice changes things. Imagine telling your younger self to avoid someone they haven't met yet. Now that person never enters their life. What if that relationship, even if painful, was meant to teach them something? What if avoiding it means they never develop the strength they needed for a future challenge? There's no way to separate lessons from experiences. They come as a package deal. Regret is a powerful emotion. It makes people think about the past in ways that aren't always realistic. When looking back, it's easy to see the mistakes and wish they could be erased. But in the moment, those mistakes weren't always obvious. You made the choices you did with the knowledge you had at the time. Expecting your past self to act with the wisdom of your present self isn't fair. Growth comes from experience, and experience includes missteps. Many stories explore the idea of changing the past. Some show a person fixing their mistakes and creating a perfect life. Others show unintended consequences. A small change leads to a different reality, one where things turn out worse. There's a reason this idea keeps appearing in books and movies. It speaks to something universal. Everyone wonders about the road not taken, but the road you did take is the only one that's real. It's the one that led you to the present. Instead of wishing to change the past, some people focus on making peace with it. That doesn't mean ignoring mistakes or pretending everything happened for a reason. It means accepting that the past can't be rewritten. The question isn't what you would change, but what you learned. If you regret something, how has it changed your behavior? If you experienced loss, how has it shaped your values? If you went through something hard, how has it made you stronger? Those are the real questions. Because even if time travel were possible, you wouldn't be the same person without the past you had. Would changing the past make life better? Maybe. Maybe not. The problem is that there's no way to test it. You can only move forward. And moving forward means using what you've learned to make better choices today. Instead of asking, what if? The better question is, what now? Most of what we do happens without us thinking about it. Breathing, blinking, walking, and even small decisions throughout the day often occur without conscious thought. These actions, known as unconscious behaviors, shape our lives in ways we rarely notice. They influence our habits, reactions, and even how we perceive the world. Imagine driving a car on a familiar route. You arrive at your destination and realize you barely remember the journey. Your mind was elsewhere, yet you obeyed traffic signals, made turns, and stopped when necessary. This is an example of unconscious action. Your brain handled everything automatically, freeing your conscious mind to focus on something else. When someone throws a ball at you, your hands move to catch it before you even think. If you touch something hot, you pull your hand away instantly. These reflexes protect you. Your brain reacts faster than your conscious mind can process, keeping you safe from harm. But unconscious actions go beyond reflexes. They extend into habits, speech patterns, and decision-making. Every day, you make choices without realizing why. You might take the same route to work, eat the same breakfast, or check your phone at certain times. These actions feel natural, but they come from habit, not conscious decision-making. Your brain prefers routine because it saves energy. Thinking through every choice would be exhausting. Instead, your mind automates repetitive tasks. Consider how people type on a keyboard. Most don't think about each key they press. Their fingers move without effort, forming words at high speed. The same happens with speaking. You don't plan every word before you say it. The words flow naturally, shaped by years of experience and social conditioning. Social interactions often rely on unconscious actions. When you meet someone new, you mirror their body language without realizing it. This subtle mimicry builds rapport and makes conversations feel smoother. If they cross their arms, you might do the same. If they smile, you're more likely to smile back. This happens automatically, helping people connect on a deeper level. Unconscious biases also play a role in everyday life. These biases shape decisions, judgments, and interactions. They form over time based on experience, culture, and environment. If someone grows up hearing that a certain type of food is bad, they may avoid it without questioning why. If they see repeated stereotypes in media, those ideas may influence their perceptions without them realizing. Think about how habits develop. At some point, you learn to brush your teeth before bed. Now, you don't question it. The routine is automatic. The same happens with negative habits. Someone who bites their nails often does so without thinking. Their brain has linked stress with the action, making it a default response. Breaking unconscious habits takes effort. A person trying to stop snacking late at night might find themselves reaching for food without realizing. By the time they notice, they're already eating. This happens because the action has been ingrained in their routine. Changing it requires awareness and effort. People's emotions influence unconscious actions. Someone in a bad mood might frown or slump their shoulders without noticing. A happy person might walk faster or speak more animatedly. These physical expressions happen naturally, without conscious control. They also affect how others respond. If a person enters a room looking upset, those around them may unconsciously adjust their behavior. Language itself includes unconscious elements. People adopt accents, speech patterns, and slang from their surroundings without trying. A person who moves to a new city might start using local phrases without realizing. The way people phrase sentences, the words they choose, and even their tone of voice all contain unconscious influences. Many daily decisions come from unconscious thought. A person in a grocery store might reach for their usual brand of cereal without considering alternatives. Someone choosing a seat in a cafe may pick the same spot every time without thinking. These choices feel natural, but they come from habit and past experience. Music and scents can trigger unconscious memories. A song from childhood might bring back forgotten moments. A familiar smell might remind someone of a person or place from years ago. These reactions happen instantly, often before the person even realizes what triggered them. Creativity involves unconscious thought as well. A writer struggling with an idea may take a break, only for the solution to come to them later. A musician might improvise a melody without planning each note. The brain continues working in the background, making connections without conscious effort. Sleep also reveals the power of unconscious action. People toss and turn, adjust blankets, and sometimes even respond to noises without waking up. Sleepwalkers can perform complex tasks like walking or even driving while unconscious. Their brains operate on autopilot, navigating familiar environments without awareness. Technology interacts with unconscious actions in modern life. Many people check their phones automatically, sometimes unlocking them without a reason. Social media apps are designed to encourage this behavior. Notifications, bright colors, and endless scrolling all tap into unconscious habits, making people engage without thinking. Marketing relies on unconscious influence. Stores arrange products in ways that encourage specific buying habits. Aisles are designed to lead customers toward impulse purchases. Brands use colors, logos, and slogans that stick in people's minds without them realizing. Advertising works best when it influences choices without requiring active thought. Unconscious actions can also shape relationships. A couple who has been together for years may develop routines without discussion. One person might always take out the trash, while the other does the dishes. These roles form over time, becoming second nature. Some unconscious actions stem from early experiences. A child who grows up in a loud household may unconsciously speak louder than others. Someone raised in a quiet environment may naturally prefer soft-spoken communication. These habits form without effort but remain throughout life. Body language operates largely unconsciously. People convey emotions and thoughts through posture, gestures, and facial expressions without intending to. Someone feeling nervous might tap their foot or fidget with their hands. A confident person may stand tall and maintain eye contact. Others pick up on these signals instinctively, responding without thinking. Unconscious actions also appear in problem solving. A person working on a difficult puzzle might step away and suddenly realize the solution later. Their brain continues analyzing the problem in the background. This is why people often get their best ideas in the shower, while driving, or just before falling asleep. Some unconscious actions are shaped by evolution. A person walking alone at night might feel uneasy in a dark alley, even if nothing is there. This instinct comes from an ancient survival mechanism designed to detect threats. Similarly, people tend to prefer faces that appear symmetrical, as an evolutionary signal of health. Noticing unconscious actions can be challenging. They happen without effort, often below the level of awareness. But paying attention to them can provide insight into behavior. Recognizing patterns can help people break bad habits, improve decision-making, and even influence how they interact with others. Each day, countless actions happen without thought. The way people move, speak, and react is shaped by forces they rarely notice. These unconscious behaviors form the foundation of daily life, shaping routines, relationships, and decisions in ways that often go unseen. Time moves in one direction, but memory does not. People remember their past, but they do not remember their future. This seems obvious at first. Memory is a record of things that happened before. But what if that is not the full story? What if memory is not limited to the past? Some people report experiences that feel like remembering something before it happens. They might know what someone is about to say before they say it. They might have a strong feeling about a place they have never been, only to later visit it and recognize everything. Sometimes they call this déjà vu. Other times they describe it as a premonition or intuition. One possible explanation is that these moments are coincidences. The human brain is excellent at finding patterns, even when none exist. If someone has a vague dream about an event and something similar happens a few weeks later, they might believe they predicted the future. But the details in the dream may have been different. Memory is not perfect. People forget the things that don't match and focus on the things that do. This is called confirmation bias. Another explanation is that these moments come from the subconscious. The brain processes more information than people realize. It picks up on tiny details, patterns, and cues that never reach conscious awareness. If someone correctly predicts that their friend is about to call, it may be because they unconsciously noticed a pattern. Maybe that friend always calls around the same time on the same day. Maybe they mentioned something earlier that hinted at the call. It feels like memory, but it is really pattern recognition. Some theories suggest time does not work the way people think it does. The idea that the past is fixed, the present is happening, and the future is unknown may be an illusion. Physicists have proposed models in which all points in time exist at once. In this view, the past, present, and future are like different locations in space. People experience time in a straight line, but that might be a limitation of human perception. If this is true, memory could work in both directions. People would remember their future the same way they remember their past. But why wouldn't they notice? One reason could be that the mind is designed to filter out information that doesn't fit expectations. If someone remembers something that has not happened yet, their brain might treat it like noise and discard it. Another possibility is that future memories come through, but they are mixed with imagination. The brain does not store memories like a video recorder. Instead, it constantly reconstructs them. This is why memories can change over time. If a future memory appears, the brain might not recognize it as different from a dream, a thought, or a guess. Some researchers have explored this idea in experiments. In one type of study, participants are shown a set of images. Later, they are asked to guess which images they will see again. If time worked strictly in one direction, their guesses should be random. But in some studies, people guessed correctly at rates slightly above chance. This suggests they might be pulling information from the future without realizing it. The effect is small and controversial, but it raises questions about how time and memory work. Some cultures have different ways of thinking about time. In Western cultures, time is often pictured as a straight line, with the past behind and the future ahead. But in some indigenous cultures, time is viewed as a circle. The past and the future are not separate, but part of the same flow. Some traditions include practices where people seek knowledge from dreams or visions, treating them as a kind of memory of what is to come. If remembering the future is real, it would explain some common experiences. A person might suddenly feel anxious about an event they have no reason to worry about, only to later find out something bad happens. Someone else might feel drawn to a place they have never been, as if they already know it. These experiences happen too often for people to ignore them completely. One challenge in understanding future memory is that people do not always notice when they are wrong. If someone has a strong feeling that something will happen and it does not, they might forget about it. But if something does happen, they remember it. This makes it difficult to study. A person who dreams about plane crashes every night will eventually have a dream that lines up with a real event. This does not mean they saw the future. Even so, there are cases where the details are too specific to dismiss. Some people have documented dreams or visions that include names, places, or exact details that later turn out to be true. These are rare, but they make people question whether time works differently than expected. Technology has also changed how people think about time. Scientists study brain activity in real time and have found that decisions happen before people are aware of making them. In some cases, brain scans can predict what choice a person will make seconds before they consciously decide. This suggests that some part of the mind knows the future in a small way before awareness catches up. There are also studies on time perception that show how the brain can warp the sense of now. In some situations, people report events happening in the wrong order. Athletes sometimes describe moments where time seems to slow down, allowing them to react faster than they should be able to. In emergencies, people recall thinking through complex choices in a fraction of a second, as if their minds were moving ahead of time. Some philosophers have suggested that if the future already exists, free will might not work the way people assume. If someone remembers the future, does that mean they are trapped in a timeline they cannot change? Or does knowing the future allow them to make different choices? If a person has a vision of something bad happening and avoids it, was the vision wrong, or did it guide them? This idea is explored in stories, myths, and movies. Some stories show characters who see their future and try to change it, only to cause it to happen in an unexpected way. Others suggest that knowledge of the future can help shape a better path. In either case, the idea that memory might not be limited to the past is something people have thought about for a long time. The possibility of remembering the future is not proven, but it remains an open question. There are many experiences that do not fit within the standard understanding of time. Whether these are illusions, subconscious pattern recognition, or something more, they challenge the way people think about memory and reality. If time is more flexible than it seems, then the mind might be more connected to the future than it appears. Imagine walking down the street and running into yourself from 5 years ago. They look like you, but they don't have your experiences, your scars, or your growth. They don't know what's coming next. They still think certain things matter that you've since realized don't. They still worry about things that you've long since stopped caring about. Would they recognize you? Your past self might see the same face, maybe a few wrinkles, maybe a few pounds gained or lost. But beyond that, would they see the same person? They might notice that your posture has changed, your voice carries a different weight, or the way you react to things isn't quite what they expect. Maybe you don't laugh at the same jokes. Maybe you no longer flinch at things that used to make you uncomfortable. People don't change overnight, but over time, those small shifts add up. A person who once hated public speaking might now be comfortable leading a meeting. Someone who once had a short temper might have learned to pause before reacting. Someone who clung to a particular identity might have let it go. Your past self wouldn't have seen these changes happen gradually. To them, it would be like skipping chapters in a book and suddenly finding a different version of the main character. Think about the way you dressed 5 years ago, the way you styled your hair, the way you spoke, the words you used, the opinions you had. Do any of those things make you cringe now? Maybe you used to see the world in black and white, but now you understand the gray areas. Maybe you had firm opinions about something, and now you aren't so sure. If your past self sat across from you at a table and you started talking, how long would it take before they realized they were looking at a stranger? Memory can be deceptive. We like to think we remember who we were, but memory often smooths out the details. You might recall a time when you were confident, but forget how uncertain you actually felt. You might remember yourself as being happier, but forget the stress that was always in the background. If you could have a conversation with your past self, they might remind you of things you've chosen to forget, just as you might tell them things they never saw coming. Now consider this in reverse. If you met your future self, the version of you 5 years from now, would you recognize them? Maybe they hold themselves differently. Maybe they have different habits. Maybe they've lost people or gained new relationships. Maybe they live somewhere else, have a different job, or think differently about things you now feel strongly about. You might ask them questions, trying to see how they got from where you are to where they are. But they wouldn't be able to explain it in a way that makes complete sense. Change happens in the details, a shift here, a moment there, until one day you look back and realize you aren't the same person anymore. Imagine your past self asking you why you made certain choices. Would you be able to explain it in a way they would understand? Maybe they had certain priorities that you've since abandoned. Maybe they were afraid of things that you now see as minor obstacles. Maybe they were holding on to things that you've since let go of. Would they be disappointed in you? Or would they be proud? Growth isn't always about becoming better. Sometimes it's just about becoming different. There might be things your past self would struggle to accept about you now. Maybe you've taken a path they never considered. Maybe you've stopped chasing things they thought were important. Maybe you've made mistakes they never saw coming. But there's also the possibility that they would admire you. Maybe they would see your strength. Maybe they would notice the things you no longer tolerate. Maybe they would see that you survived things they were afraid of. Maybe they would envy the way you carry yourself now. Would your past self want to be you? If the answer is no, that doesn't mean you've failed. It just means you've changed in ways they couldn't predict. But if the answer is yes, then maybe you've become the person you once hoped to be. You are not the same person you were a decade ago. In fact, you may not even be the same person you were last year. Your body, your thoughts, and your experiences constantly change, shaping who you are in ways you may not always notice. Science backs this up. Every 7 to 10 years, almost all the cells in your body are replaced. The molecules making up your skin, muscles, and even bones have been swapped out for new ones. From a biological standpoint, most of what you think of as you has been recycled multiple times throughout your life. But does that mean the old you is gone? Or is there something deeper that stays the same? Memories play a role in how you define yourself. The things you remember shape the story you tell about who you are. But memory is unreliable. Psychological studies show that every time you recall a memory, your brain changes it slightly. Over time, these changes add up, making your past a shifting landscape rather than a fixed record. Some details fade, while others take on new meanings. If your memories define you, but those memories are always changing, then what does that say about your identity? Think back to a decision you made 5 years ago. Maybe it was something small, like what job to take or where to live. Maybe it was something big, like ending a relationship or choosing a new path. If you had to make that decision today, would you make the same choice? Your answer probably depends on what you've learned since then. The experiences you've had, the books you've read, and the people you've met have all shaped your thinking. If the old you would have made a different decision, does that mean you've become someone else? Your personality also changes over time. Psychologists call this the Big Five personality traits: openness, conscientiousness, extroversion, agreeableness, and neuroticism. Studies show that these traits shift as people age. Most people become more conscientious and agreeable over time, meaning they get better at managing responsibilities and working with others. At the same time, they often become less neurotic, meaning they feel less anxiety and stress about things they once found overwhelming. If your personality today is different from your personality 10 years ago, are you still the same person? Your beliefs also shift. Think about something you once believed strongly, but later changed your mind about. Maybe it was a political view, a religious belief, or an idea about how the world works. At some point, you encountered new information or had an experience that forced you to rethink your position. If someone had recorded you explaining your old belief and you listened to it now, would you even recognize that version of yourself? There are moments in life that divide your existence into before and after. Sometimes these moments come from joy, a birth, a new love, a major achievement. Other times they come from pain, a loss, a betrayal, a failure. These experiences leave marks that cannot be undone. You might still carry the same name and live in the same body, but after those moments, something fundamental about you has changed. If you met an old friend who hadn't seen you in years, would they notice the difference? More importantly, would they understand it? Your habits and routines also define who you are. The way you start your morning, the foods you eat, the hobbies you keep, all of these shape your identity in ways you may not think about. If you once spent hours drawing every day but haven't picked up a pencil in years, are you still an artist? If you used to run marathons but now spend your weekends reading, are you still a runner? Sometimes people say, I used to be that kind of person. But if you used to be, and now you aren't, then who are you now? Language plays a role in shaping identity as well. The words you use change over time, influenced by the people around you and the culture you absorb. If you moved to a new country and started speaking a different language, your thoughts would shift too. Studies show that bilingual people sometimes feel like they have different personalities when speaking different languages. If the way you express yourself changes, does that mean your inner self changes too? Technology adds another layer. If someone scrolled through your old social media posts from 10 years ago, what would they see? Would you be proud of everything you said back then, or would some of it make you cringe? If you were judged only by the digital traces you left behind, would that be an accurate picture of who you are today? Some people argue that something deeper remains constant, perhaps a soul, a core self, or an essence that stays the same no matter how much you change. Others believe that identity is fluid, a collection of experiences rather than a fixed entity. If you could step outside yourself and look at your life as a timeline, would you see a continuous thread, or would it look more like a series of different selves, connected but distinct? If someone handed you a journal written by your past self, would you agree with the person who wrote it? Would you feel proud, embarrassed, or disconnected? Would you recognize your handwriting but feel like the words belong to someone else? Think about a time you looked in the mirror and felt unfamiliar to yourself. Maybe it was after a big change, like a breakup or a career shift. Maybe it was during a quiet moment when you suddenly felt like a stranger in your own skin. What causes that feeling? Is it a loss of identity, or is it simply a moment of realization that you have changed more than you thought? Change happens gradually. Most people don't wake up one morning feeling completely different, but over months and years, the changes add up. Your tastes evolve, your interests shift, your reactions to situations change. The things that once felt important fade into the background, replaced by new priorities. If you met the person you were 10 years ago, would you get along? Would you agree on things, or would you argue? Would you be able to explain how you got from there to here? There is no single answer to whether you are still the same person. Some things about you remain constant, while others transform. But if you are always changing, then perhaps the better question is, at what point does change make you someone new? If humanity vanished tomorrow, what would remain? Cities would stand silent, streets empty, and lights flickering for as long as power grids held. Nature would begin its slow reclaiming process, vines creeping over concrete, roots breaking through roads. The world would not end, but human presence would. The last traces of our existence would be what we left behind, the structures we built, the signals we sent, and the damage we caused. Buildings would hold out for decades. Skyscrapers, once symbols of ambition, would weaken as steel corroded and glass fell from their frames. Homes would last longer, but without maintenance, leaks and mold would eat away at their walls. Roofs would collapse under the weight of neglect. The strongest buildings, made of stone and reinforced concrete, might endure for centuries, standing as hollow shells long after their purpose had faded. The pyramids of Egypt, already thousands of years old, would remain, but even they would wear down over time. Bridges and dams, massive feats of engineering, would break apart without human intervention. Steel suspension cables would rust and snap. Rivers would reclaim their natural courses as dams failed, flooding areas that had been controlled for centuries. Some structures would linger longer than others. The Hoover Dam, designed to last, might survive for 1,000 years before erosion and water pressure took their toll. The Great Wall of China, already partly consumed by the land, would erode further, stones shifting back into the earth. If satellites still orbited the planet, they would carry traces of human activity for centuries. Some would fall back into the atmosphere, burning up on re-entry. Others would drift through space for thousands of years, silent records of a civilization that once reached beyond its home planet. The Voyager probes, launched decades ago, would continue traveling through deep space. They carry golden records etched with sounds and images meant to introduce humanity to any potential alien life. If intelligent beings found them, those records might be the last evidence that humans ever existed. Radio waves would stretch out into the universe, carrying signals from old broadcasts. The earliest transmissions, news reports, music, speeches, would continue traveling at the speed of light. These signals, weak as they are, would spread farther than any physical artifact. A distant civilization, if it had the right equipment, could one day detect the remnants of a 1940s radio broadcast, a faint echo of a species long gone. Beneath the surface, human waste would outlast even our buildings. Nuclear waste, buried deep underground, would remain dangerous for thousands of years. Some of it would be sealed in secure facilities, but without maintenance, those seals would eventually fail. Future organisms, if any survived, might stumble upon these sites, unaware of the radiation locked within. Plastic, one of humanity's most widespread materials, would linger for millennia. In the oceans, plastic debris would break into smaller and smaller pieces, but it would not disappear. The planet's biodiversity would shift in unpredictable ways. Domesticated animals would struggle. Pets left behind in empty homes would not survive long without food and shelter. Cattle, bred for dependence on humans, would die off in large numbers. Some animals would adapt. Feral dogs might revert to their wild instincts, forming packs and competing with wolves. Rats and cockroaches, which thrived alongside humans, would find new ways to persist. Birds would nest in abandoned buildings until those buildings crumbled. Plant life would grow unchecked. In some regions, forests would reclaim cities, roots cracking through pavement, trees breaking through the remains of homes and offices. In colder climates, without heating systems to protect them, many cultivated plants would die off in harsh winters. Crops that depended on human care, wheat, corn, rice, would vanish from the fields. Only the hardiest plants, those that could survive without constant intervention, would persist. In the ocean, marine ecosystems would shift. Overfished populations might rebound, freed from human exploitation. Coral reefs, suffering from pollution and climate change, might begin a slow recovery. Deep-sea structures, such as sunken ships and underwater cables, would serve as artificial reefs, providing homes for marine life long after their human purpose had been forgotten. Climate change, triggered by industrial activity, would continue shaping the planet. Carbon already released into the atmosphere would linger, affecting temperatures for centuries. The effects of human-driven global warming, melting ice caps, rising sea levels, altered weather patterns, would play out long after people were gone. Eventually, the planet would stabilize, but it would not return to the way it was before humanity. The last traces of human presence might not be physical at all. Artificial intelligence, if it still functioned, could continue operating in isolated systems. Servers running on solar power might persist for years, maintaining archives of human knowledge. If an AI had been designed to learn and evolve, it might continue processing information long after its creators had disappeared. It could attempt to carry out its last instructions, even if those instructions no longer made sense in an empty world. Eventually, almost everything humans built would erode, decay, or be buried. The planet would continue without us, reshaping itself as it always has. Some traces of humanity would last longer than others, certain materials, certain structures, certain artifacts. But in the grand scale of time, our presence would be a brief mark, a thin layer in the geological record. Future species, if any evolved, might find fossils of our bones, remnants of our tools, fragments of our civilization. They might wonder who we were, what we built, and why we vanished. The human eye sees only a small part of the electromagnetic spectrum. We call this part visible light. It includes the colors we recognize: red, orange, yellow, green, blue, and violet. But beyond these colors, there are other wavelengths of light we cannot see. Infrared light exists beyond red, and ultraviolet light lies past violet. These invisible colors surround us, but our eyes are not built to detect them. Some animals can see what we cannot. Bees and butterflies see ultraviolet patterns on flowers that guide them to nectar. Snakes use infrared vision to detect the heat of their prey in complete darkness. Mantis shrimp have some of the most complex eyes in the animal kingdom, capable of detecting a broad range of wavelengths, including some we do not have names for. If they could describe what they see, the colors would be unlike anything in human experience. Technology helps us perceive the unseen. Infrared cameras let us see heat signatures, making the invisible visible. Ultraviolet photography reveals patterns on plants and markings on certain animals that do not appear under normal light. Astronomers use telescopes that detect radio waves, X-rays, and gamma rays, turning them into images we can interpret. The colors in these images are not real in the way we usually think about color. They are assigned based on intensity, helping us understand patterns beyond our natural vision. Our inability to see certain colors does not mean they do not exist. It only means our biology limits our perception. The way we see the world is not a complete representation of reality. If other beings exist with different visual capabilities, they would experience a world with more or fewer colors than we do. A species with eyes sensitive to infrared might see a glowing, shifting landscape where heat sources change in brightness. An organism tuned to ultraviolet might see an electric, high-contrast world filled with hidden patterns. Humans have 3 types of color receptors, or cones, in their eyes. Some animals have 4, 5, or even more. Birds, for example, see a broader range of colors than we do because they have an extra type of cone that detects ultraviolet light. Some people, known as tetrachromates, have an additional cone that allows them to see subtle color variations most of us cannot. To them, a simple paint swatch of yellow might contain shades that look entirely different from one another, while to most people, it appears as a single color. The existence of unseen colors raises questions about perception itself. If we cannot see them, how do we know what we are missing? The answer comes from physics and experimentation. We measure light in wavelengths, and instruments confirm the existence of colors we do not perceive. This also applies to sound. Humans hear only a limited range of frequencies. Bats, dolphins, and elephants communicate using sounds outside our hearing range. Just as the world contains more colors than we see, it contains more sounds than we hear. Even within the human population, perception varies. Colorblind individuals lack 1 or more types of cones, altering the way they experience color. A person with red-green colorblindness does not see the world in grayscale, but they might have trouble distinguishing between shades that look distinct to others. To them, the world is not lacking color. It simply has different contrasts and relationships. If we could expand our perception, how would it change our understanding of the world? Imagine walking outside and seeing heat radiating off buildings and bodies, or looking at a flower and noticing patterns that were always there but never visible to us. Artists might create new pigments based on ultraviolet reflections, and fashion might incorporate infrared fabrics that change appearance based on temperature. Everyday life would shift as our perception of reality expanded. Color does not exist in the world itself. It is a product of the brain interpreting wavelengths of light. A red apple is not inherently red. It absorbs most wavelengths and reflects the ones we perceive as red. If our eyes were built differently, the apple might appear another color entirely. This means that what we consider objective truth is really just a shared perception. Some theories suggest that early humans may have seen colors differently than we do today. Ancient texts, like Homer's Odyssey, describe the sea as wine dark rather than blue. Some researchers believe this was due to differences in language and categorization rather than vision itself. Many ancient cultures had words for black, white, and red before developing terms for blue and green. The way people describe color is shaped by culture, language, and necessity. New colors can also be created through technology. Scientists have developed pigments that reflect wavelengths in unique ways. One of the darkest substances ever made, known as vantablack, absorbs 99.96% of light, making objects appear almost two-dimensional. Other new materials create shimmering, angle-dependent colors that shift as they move. These inventions expand our ability to manipulate light, but they do not change the fundamental limits of human vision. If colors exist that we cannot see, what else might be beyond our perception? Other senses, like smell and taste, also operate within narrow biological constraints. Many animals have far stronger senses of smell than humans. Dogs detect scents in layers, picking up on details we miss entirely. Some birds navigate using Earth's magnetic field, sensing something humans cannot directly perceive. Whales and elephants communicate across great distances with infrasound, which is below the range of human hearing. Our perception of the world is shaped by our biology. The colors we see, the sounds we hear, and the sensations we feel are all filtered through the limits of our senses. Just as ancient people once lacked words for certain colors, there may be aspects of reality that we do not yet have the ability to comprehend. Technology gives us glimpses beyond our natural limits, but it does not change the fact that we are experiencing only a fraction of what exists. The idea of unseen colors challenges the way we think about reality. If something as fundamental as color is shaped by perception, then many other things we take for granted might also be subjective. The universe is far more complex than what our senses reveal. What we see is only a small piece of what is really there. Aliens might know we exist, but they choose to ignore us. That idea seems strange at first. If intelligent life is out there, why wouldn't they want to make contact? The universe is vast, and we've spent years searching for any sign that we are not alone. But what if we are the ones being ignored? There are many reasons why an advanced civilization would choose to avoid us, and none of them are particularly comforting. One reason could be that we are too primitive. If a civilization is capable of interstellar travel, they must be far more advanced than we are. Compared to them, we might look like insects. When humans walk through a forest, they don't stop to introduce themselves to the ants. They step over them or ignore them entirely. To an alien species with advanced technology, we could be just as insignificant. They might see no value in making contact with a species that is still struggling with war, disease, and environmental destruction. Another possibility is that they are following a rule of non-interference. In science fiction, this idea is often called the Prime Directive, a rule that forbids interfering with less advanced civilizations. If a powerful alien species follows a similar rule, they might be deliberately avoiding us to let us develop on our own. This would be like watching an ant colony build its nest without stepping in to help or harm it. The aliens could be studying us from a distance, waiting to see what kind of civilization we become before making contact. It is also possible that they fear us. This might seem unlikely at first. We are still stuck on our own planet, struggling to send astronauts beyond the moon. Why would an advanced species fear us? The answer lies in history. Every time a powerful civilization has come into contact with a weaker one, the weaker civilization has usually suffered. When European explorers arrived in the Americas, they brought diseases and weapons that devastated the native populations. Even though the explorers did not always intend to destroy the people they met, the result was the same. An intelligent alien species might worry that contact with us could lead to unintended consequences for them or for us. They might prefer to keep their distance rather than risk introducing something harmful. Another explanation is that we are not interesting enough. We often assume that if aliens exist, they must be curious about us. But curiosity is not guaranteed. We do not study every animal on Earth with the same level of interest. Some species, like dolphins or chimpanzees, get more attention because they show intelligence. Others, like bacteria or worms, are ignored unless they are useful or dangerous. If aliens categorize us as unremarkable, they might have no reason to engage with us. Perhaps they are waiting for a sign that we are ready. An advanced species might be watching us and looking for specific indicators of intelligence. These indicators could be technological, like developing faster-than-light travel, or ethical, like achieving global peace. If we have not yet demonstrated these traits, they may see us as an incomplete civilization, one that is still evolving. They might be willing to make contact, but only once we reach a certain milestone. There is also the possibility that they communicate in ways we cannot understand. We assume that any intelligent species would use radio waves or some other form of electromagnetic signal to communicate. But what if they rely on something entirely different? Imagine trying to explain the internet to a fish. The fish has no concept of electricity, let alone wireless signals. It lives in an environment where such things do not exist. If aliens use a form of communication beyond our understanding, they might be trying to talk to us, but we are simply not capable of hearing them. Another unsettling idea is that they already know about us, but see no reason to interact. If an ant colony grows near a highway, humans may be aware of it, but feel no need to interfere. We let the ants build their tunnels and go about their lives because they do not affect us. Aliens might view us the same way. They may have charted our planet long ago and found nothing of interest. In that case, their silence is not due to ignorance, it is a conscious choice. It is also possible that space is filled with dangers we do not yet understand. We assume that any intelligent species would be peaceful and curious, but there is no guarantee of that. The universe may contain civilizations that are hostile or dangerous. If that is true, any intelligent species would have a strong reason to stay quiet. They would avoid sending signals that could attract attention. This idea is known as the dark forest theory. In this view, space is like a dark forest filled with hunters. The safest strategy is to remain silent and hidden. If this is true, then aliens might know we are here but choose to stay quiet to avoid drawing attention. There is also a chance that we are simply in the wrong place at the wrong time. The universe is billions of years old. Civilizations could have risen and fallen long before we ever existed. If an advanced species lived millions of years ago and then disappeared, we would never know they were here. The same thing could happen in the future. A powerful civilization could rise long after we are gone. In that case, we are not being ignored. We just missed our chance to overlap with them. Finally, there is the possibility that we are alone. This is the most unsettling answer of all. We search for aliens because we want to believe that we are not the only intelligent beings in the universe. But what if we are? If life is incredibly rare, then there may be no one out there to ignore us in the first place. This would mean that we have an enormous responsibility. If we are the only intelligent life, then everything we do matters even more. We would be the sole witnesses to the universe, the only ones capable of understanding it. The idea that aliens ignore us forces us to confront our own significance. It challenges our assumptions about intelligence, communication, and our place in the universe. If they exist and they choose not to contact us, the reasons for that decision could reveal more about us than them. Are we too primitive, too dangerous, or simply not interesting enough? Until we have answers, we can only continue to search and wonder if anyone is watching from the dark. The brain is the only organ that named itself. This fact seems obvious, yet it reveals something deep about human consciousness. The brain, made of billions of neurons, somehow became aware enough to give itself a label. No other organ does this. The heart beats, the lungs expand and contract, but neither has ever questioned its own existence. The brain, however, studies itself. It wonders what it is and how it works. It tries to define itself using the very circuits that make up its structure. Imagine a hand trying to grab itself. That's the kind of paradox the brain faces when it tries to understand itself. It is both the subject and the object of its own study. This is different from any other area of science. A physicist studies the laws of the universe without being the universe itself. A biologist studies life, but is not life itself in the same way the brain studies the brain. The brain is both the observer and the observed, the questioner and the answer. Language plays a key role in this self-recognition. Humans label everything. We name objects, emotions, and concepts. We even give names to things we don't fully understand, like black holes or dark matter. The brain, through language, created a word for itself: brain. That word doesn't capture the full complexity of what it does, but it is enough to make it distinct from everything else. It's enough to separate it from other organs, even though they all work together to sustain life. The brain's ability to name itself suggests a higher level of self-awareness than any other organ. The liver performs complex chemical reactions, but it doesn't think about its purpose. The kidneys filter blood but don't question the meaning of filtration. The brain, in contrast, does more than process signals. It reflects on itself. It asks what it is, how it works, and even whether it truly has free will. This self-awareness isn't just about naming. It extends to understanding. The brain maps its own structure. Neuroscientists study neurons, synapses, and networks, all of which make up the brain itself. It's like a machine trying to reverse engineer its own blueprint. This ability is rare. Most things don't know what they are. A rock doesn't question its existence. A tree doesn't try to understand photosynthesis. But the brain constantly seeks to explain itself. There's also an irony in this. The brain is the source of all human knowledge, yet it struggles to fully grasp its own workings. It knows how the body functions, how diseases spread, and how to build machines that extend human abilities. But when it turns inward, it finds itself wrapped in mysteries. Consciousness, memory, and thought remain difficult to define. Even the question of how thoughts form is still debated. The brain named itself, but it still doesn't fully understand itself. Consider how humans develop self-awareness. A baby is not born knowing it has a brain. It doesn't even know it is separate from the world around it. Over time, it learns that its body is distinct from other objects. It learns words, and eventually it learns the concept of a brain. But does that mean the baby is suddenly aware of its own mind? Or is self-awareness a gradual process that never truly ends? If the brain named itself, at what point in a human life does that recognition happen? One way to explore this question is to look at how different cultures and times have understood the brain. Ancient Egyptians didn't see it as important. When preparing a body for mummification, they removed the brain and discarded it, believing the heart was the seat of thought. Ancient Greeks debated its role, with some thinkers like Aristotle believing the heart was where thinking happened, while others, like Hippocrates, placed thought in the brain. Even today, different fields approach the brain in different ways. Neuroscientists see it as a network of electrical and chemical processes. Psychologists view it as the source of emotions, decisions, and behaviors. Philosophers ask whether it is even possible to fully understand itself. Modern science has made huge progress in mapping the brain. MRI scans show which areas activate when we think, move, or feel emotions. Neurosurgeons can stimulate parts of the brain to trigger memories or sensations. But none of this explains why or how the brain became aware of itself. It only shows that it does. There's also the question of whether self-awareness is unique to humans. Other animals have brains, but do they name them? Some animals show signs of self-recognition. A chimpanzee can recognize itself in a mirror. Dolphins display problem-solving skills that suggest complex thinking. But do they have a concept of a brain? Do they reflect on their own thoughts? Or is that level of self-awareness only a human trait? Artificial intelligence adds another layer to this question. Machines process information, learn from data, and even mimic human conversation. But does a machine ever wonder what it is? Could an AI, given enough complexity, eventually name itself the way the brain did? Or is there something special about biological consciousness that makes self-awareness possible? The fact that the brain named itself suggests something even deeper. It means that language, thought, and identity are all tied together. The brain created a concept of itself, which means it had to separate itself from everything else. It had to recognize that it was not just another part of the body, but something distinct, something capable of thought. This separation may be what allows humans to reflect on existence in a way no other creature can. Even within a single person, the brain does not experience itself as a single entity. It has different layers of function. Some parts regulate automatic processes like breathing and heartbeat. Others handle reasoning and decision-making. When people talk about themselves, are they referring to their conscious thoughts or the deeper, hidden parts of the mind that influence behavior without awareness? If a person loses memories, are they still the same person? If the brain suffers damage, does self-awareness fade? These questions make it clear that while the brain named itself, it may not fully understand what that means. The paradox of self-awareness runs deep. The brain creates theories about itself, but it can never be fully outside itself to observe directly. It relies on tools like brain scans and psychological experiments, but these are still interpretations coming from within itself. No other part of the body does this. The heart beats without asking why. The lungs inhale and exhale without considering the process. The brain, however, asks endless questions. It examines itself, names itself, and still wonders what it truly is. Even the simple act of thinking about the brain creates another layer of complexity. Right now, as you read these words, your brain is processing them, but at the same time, it may also be thinking about itself thinking. This loop of self-reference is unique. No other organ does this. This ability to reflect on itself, to name itself, and to question its own existence makes the brain different from everything else we know. While the brain named itself, it still doesn't have all the answers. It is both the creator of knowledge and the greatest mystery. It is the tool we use to understand everything, yet it remains one of the hardest things to fully grasp. Even as we learn more about neuroscience, the deeper question remains: how did a collection of neurons become something that could think, name itself, and wonder about its own existence? There are things we can see, hear, touch, taste, and smell. These senses help us navigate the world, but they also limit what we know. Just because we can't detect something doesn't mean it isn't real. The unseen exists all around us, shaping the way we live without our awareness. Think about air. You don't see it, but you know it's there. You feel it move when the wind blows. You see its effects when leaves rustle or clouds drift. You rely on it with every breath, yet you rarely stop to consider its presence. If someone had never felt wind before, they might struggle to believe in air. It's not visible, but it's real. Sound works the same way. It exists as vibrations moving through the air, but those vibrations are only meaningful if they enter an ear capable of detecting them. Humans can hear sounds within a specific range, but that range is limited. Dogs hear high-pitched frequencies that we can't. Elephants communicate with infrasound, which is too low for us to detect. The sounds exist, whether or not we perceive them. Light is another example. The human eye detects only a small portion of the electromagnetic spectrum. We see colors from red to violet, but beyond violet is ultraviolet, which bees can see. Beyond red is infrared, which snakes use to detect heat. X-rays and radio waves fill the same spectrum, yet they are invisible to us. Without the right tools, we wouldn't even know they were there. Our bodies are filled with unseen forces. Neurons fire in the brain, sending electrical signals that translate into thoughts, memories, and actions. You can't see a thought, but you know you have them. Emotions work the same way. You feel anger, joy, or sadness, but these feelings are not physical objects. The body reacts to them. Your heart races, your muscles tense, your face smiles, but the emotions themselves are invisible. History is filled with moments when people doubted the unseen. Germs were once a mystery. Before microscopes, no one knew bacteria and viruses existed. People saw illness as a curse or bad luck. Now we understand that tiny organisms, invisible to the naked eye, cause disease. Gravity was once just a vague idea. We experience its effects every second, but we can't see it. We know it's there because things fall, planets orbit, and tides move with the pull of the moon. Electricity is another unseen force. You flip a switch and a light turns on. The power flows through wires, but you can't see it moving. It's only visible in rare moments, like lightning flashing across the sky. Magnetism is similar. A magnet pulls on metal without touching it. The force is there, acting in the space between objects, unseen but real. The concept of the unseen goes beyond physics and biology. It affects how people interact. Trust is invisible. You can't hold it or measure it, but you feel when it's present and know when it's broken. Love exists in the same way. You see its effects in actions and words, but love itself has no physical form. The same is true for fear. It changes behavior, shapes decisions, and influences lives, yet no one can point to fear itself. The digital world thrives on the unseen. Wi-Fi connects devices without cables. Data moves through the air, reaching phones and computers, yet it remains invisible. If someone had never used technology, explaining wireless communication would seem impossible. The internet itself is unseen. You type a question, and an answer appears. Billions of bits of information travel instantly, yet none of it is visible to the eye. The limits of perception shape how people think about reality. If something is unseen, many assume it isn't there. But throughout history, the unseen has often turned out to be real. People once believed the Earth was flat because they couldn't see its curvature. They thought the sun revolved around the Earth because they couldn't feel the planet moving. Now we understand that appearances can be misleading. The same principle applies to personal experiences. Someone may feel alone in a crowded room. Their loneliness is unseen, but it is as real as any physical barrier. A person suffering from anxiety or depression may appear fine on the outside, but inside, they struggle with emotions no one else can see. The unseen affects relationships, decisions, and daily life in ways that often go unnoticed. Even memory falls into the category of the unseen. You can't see the past, but you remember it. You can't reach out and touch a childhood moment, but it exists in your mind. Memory influences how people view themselves. Someone who remembers past failures may hesitate to try again. Someone who holds on to past joys may find strength in difficult times. These memories shape identity, even though they have no physical form. The unseen plays a role in creativity. Ideas start as invisible thoughts. A painter envisions an image before it touches the canvas. A writer sees a story in their mind before typing a single word. A musician hears a melody before playing a note. Every invention, every work of art, every great achievement begins in the unseen world of imagination before becoming reality. Beliefs, whether religious or philosophical, also center on the unseen. Many people believe in forces beyond what the eye can detect. Some call it fate, others call it energy, and some see it as divine. These beliefs shape lives, guiding choices and giving meaning to existence. Faith itself is unseen. It exists within a person, driving them to act, hope, or persevere despite uncertainty. Science continues to uncover new aspects of the unseen. Dark matter and dark energy make up most of the universe, yet no one has seen them directly. Theories suggest they exist based on their effects on galaxies and gravity. Quantum physics reveals particles that behave in ways that seem impossible under classical physics. Particles can exist in two places at once, change states when observed, and influence each other across vast distances. The deeper we explore reality, the more we realize how much is unseen. The vastness of space hides countless mysteries. The depths of the ocean hold creatures yet to be discovered. Even within the human mind, thoughts form, memories fade, and emotions rise, all without being seen. Understanding the unseen changes how people view the world. It reminds us that limits in perception do not mean limits in reality. It encourages curiosity, pushing us to question what we know and explore what we don't. It challenges assumptions, urging us to consider the invisible forces shaping our lives. The unseen is not something to fear. It is not a void or an absence. It is the foundation of everything we experience. You wake up. The room is unfamiliar. The bed beneath you is stiff, the sheets a color you don't recognize. There's a faint hum in the air, maybe from an air conditioner or a refrigerator. You don't know. You sit up, and your hands feel foreign to you. You examine them, turning them over, tracing the lines on your palms. They mean something, but you don't know what. You swing your legs over the edge of the bed and stand. The floor is cold. You don't know where you are. More importantly, you don't know who you are. Your mind is empty of details, but something deeper hums beneath that emptiness. A feeling. You are someone. You have thoughts, you have instincts. But the facts, the things that ground a person to a life, are missing. You step toward the door. Your body moves smoothly, as if on autopilot. You know how to walk. You know how to reach for the handle. You turn it without thinking. This knowledge, the kind that sits in your muscles and bones, is intact. Your body remembers what your mind does not. But memory is more than function. It is the thread that ties you to everything. And without it, you are untethered. You step into the hallway. The walls stretch out, plain and unremarkable. You don't recognize them. You don't recognize the sound of your own breath. The rhythm of your footsteps feels like it should be familiar, but it isn't. You could be anyone. You could belong to any life. There is nothing inside you to contradict that thought. A woman appears at the end of the hall. She smiles, but her face does nothing to stir recognition in you. She says your name, but the sound of it lands without weight. You try to respond, but your own voice surprises you. It belongs to you, yet it doesn't. She sees the confusion on your face. Her expression changes. Concern, maybe. Fear, even. She says your name again, slower this time, as if giving you a chance to hold on to it. But there is nothing to hold. It slips away as soon as she speaks it. She asks if you're okay. You don't know how to answer that. What does it mean to be okay? You are standing. You are breathing. Your heart is beating. But you have no frame of reference. Were you okay yesterday? The day before? What does okay even feel like? You search your mind for an answer, but all you find is silence. She tells you that she is your wife. The word lands with meaning, but not feeling. You understand what a wife is. You understand what a husband is. You understand relationships, bonds, connections. But you don't feel any of that when you look at her. There is only the fact of her, the reality that she exists in front of you. She reaches for your hand, but her touch is foreign. It doesn't stir anything inside you. She is a stranger holding your hand and calling you by a name that feels hollow. She leads you to the living room. There are photos on the walls. You see your face among them. You are smiling in some. You are serious in others. In one, you are holding a child. She says it is your son. You look at the child's face, at the curve of his nose, the shape of his eyes. You see the resemblance. You understand genetics. You understand family. But you don't feel it. There is no connection between you and the boy in the picture. He is a fact like everything else in this house, a fact without meaning. She brings you to a mirror. You look into it and see your own face, but it isn't yours. It is the face of a stranger. You move, and it moves with you. You blink, and it blinks back, but there is nothing in your mind that recognizes it. You touch your cheek, and the reflection does the same. The logic of the moment tells you this is you. But logic isn't enough. The days pass. The woman who calls herself your wife tells you stories. She says you love coffee, but when she hands you a cup, the taste is sharp and unfamiliar. She says you like the smell of rain, but when a storm rolls in, the scent of wet earth stirs nothing in you. She tells you about the vacations you took, the fights you had, the things that made you laugh. These stories are meant to bring you back to yourself, but they are just words. They belong to someone, but not to you. You learn things about the world. You know how to hold a fork. You know how to tie your shoes. You understand that the sun rises in the east and sets in the west. You know history, science, math. These things are there, solid and unmoving, but you don't know what kind of person you were. Were you kind? Were you cruel? Did you love deeply or did you hold people at a distance? These are things that facts cannot tell you. These are things that memory carries. And without it, you are an outline of a person without the colors that make you real. The woman shows you a journal. Your handwriting covers the pages. You read your own words, but they feel like they belong to someone else. The thoughts are familiar in structure, in rhythm, in phrasing, but they don't belong to you. You absorb them like a student learning about a historical figure. You take notes in your mind, you gather data, but none of it changes the emptiness inside you. You meet people who call you their friend. They tell you jokes you once loved, but they don't make you laugh. They remind you of shared memories, but to you, they are just stories. You nod and smile, but you do not feel what they feel. You are a ghost in your own life, watching it from a distance. You begin to learn about yourself in a different way, not through memories, but through patterns. You see how you react to things. You notice what makes you tense, what makes you relax. You find yourself drawn to certain music, certain foods. These small things begin to define you, not because they remind you of who you were, but because they shape who you are now. One day you wake up and see the woman beside you. She is still a stranger. But when she smiles, you find yourself smiling back, not because you remember loving her, but because in this moment you do. The past is gone. The person you were is gone. But the person you are, whoever that may be, is beginning to form. Not from memories, but from moments. Not from history, but from now.